Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, aka Caesar the Crowd Pleaser, and today for episode 17, this is going to be a doozy. We're going to do the commons and uncommon set review for Dark Frontier. That is right. So, a couple of things I want to go over real quick. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I have played with the format a little bit. It has been out for roughly 2 weeks, so I do apologize. I wanted to get this podcast out sooner, but due to real life time constraints, as well as my mic not working for a couple of days till I got the problem fixed, made it a bit of an issue. I actually recorded this about 20 minutes of this prior to then I realized that the mic wasn't working. Thank goodness I didn't record the whole thing. If you guys are checking this on YouTube, I am going to have the cards displayed in front of you for you to see as a reference point. And yeah, so long story short, instead of going down each card and taking my time evaluating it ahead of time and then discussing it on the podcast, I'm actually going to be looking at some of these cards for the first time and evaluating them with you guys, so you get my 100% true evaluation of it. Some cards I have played with, a lot of them I have not still, and some I've only seen while going through draft picks. So yeah, we're going to be doing that today. That being said, we are going to skip the pack one, pick one today because this is going to be a long one. So I'd rather get to it. And also, last time I put the commons and uncommons together, or separate. This time I'm going to put them together, even though it might make it a little bit longer, because I feel like that's the important stuff, and to have it condensed into one show might be more beneficial for most people. So last thing I want to do is mention the YouTube channel where you might be viewing this right now, which is EJthePodcast on YouTube. That's right. That's where you can find all of my content from Twitch streams that I recorded and posted on here and cut all the intermittent stuff out, constructed videos, tournament videos, drafts, you name it, it's up here. So definitely check that out. Throw a subscribe out that way and like it. Definitely goes a long way towards helping me make more content. Next up is twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. This is where I stream live every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday afternoon or mornings. So you guys can check me out, come hang out, and just make discussions on plays and things like that, and picks and whatnot, and even just talk about real life stuff. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for that. So let's get into it. First things first, there were 3 new mechanics introduced to the format. So I'm going to go over those a little bit in depth now, and then might touch on them a little more later on as they come up. First up is twist. So the theme behind this mechanic, or this format, is that we're starting to experience the changing of people from coming from the Dark Frontier or the Shadowlands, I believe. And so they picked a couple of things that kind of go in theme with that. First one being twist, which is the expanse of the Shadowlands slowly twisting people into darker images of themselves. So to represent this, twist is only gonna be on a creature for right now, or unit, and it has a cost. So 1, 2, 5 doesn't matter. It has you pay a certain amount of power to twist the unit. When you twist the unit, it always will get a +1 attack and -1 health, regardless. It just always does that. Now, of note, sometimes this will be a repeatable thing. Like you might have, for example, a 2/4 that could do this a couple of times, or there might be something like a 2/1 and you're only able to do it one time and it dies. So any creature you can, or any unit, you continue to twist them until they die. Of note, it is a permanent stat change, so you can't dark return them. Well, I guess you can, because it gives them a +1, but it's not like you're going to dark return them and they are back at their starting health. And then for twisting, you also get an ability. This can range from stunning a unit to drawing a card to pinging your unit, dealing 1 damage to them, and gaining a life. So once again, the twist mechanic, it makes things a little more aggressive. Obviously, they're darker selves by adding their attack, but it makes them more vulnerable, lowering their health, and then you get special bonuses from that. So that is something to consider, and we will be evaluating that as well. Next up is Onslaught. This is a really aggressive mechanic. It is similar to Raid in Magic the Gathering, for those of you that play that. And essentially what Onslaught means is a unit or anything that has onslaught will trigger an additional ability if you or a unit you control attack this turn. So this means you can attack with your units, that triggers it. You can use a killer ability on a unit that counts as an attack, and so that will trigger onslaught, or you yourself can attack with a relic weapon. All three instances will trigger or activate onslaught. So when you play the card, summon it, it will activate whatever the onslaught ability is, which could be a simple stat bonus to a certain spell to some additional cantrip. And lastly, our latest mechanic or last mechanic will be shift / emerge. The primary is called shift. And what this means is you will have a shift cost for a unit. This only goes on units right now. And it will have a shift cost. Sometimes it'll be more expensive than the standard cost. Sometimes it'll be less expensive or cheaper. That all depends on what the shift is. Now, every unit that gets shifted automatically will be put in like a stasis lock for 3 turns. You see three little tick marks on the card, and each turn that it's in play, you will lose 1. Now, while they're in stasis, their static abilities still stand true. So if it's, for example, when you play a unit, it gets a +1/+1. Even if it's in shifted and stasis, you will still be able to. It would still get the +1/+1. But when they are shifted, they cannot attack, they cannot block, and they cannot be targeted by specific things, neither yours nor your opponent's. So anything that targets that unit cannot do it. That being said, any kind of general mass effects like board wipes will still work. So deal 1 damage to all units, deal 3 damage to all units, destroy all your opponent's units. All those things will still happen to a unit that is shifted. Now, I said /emerge because after the 3 turns, the unit that is shifted will emerge, which is the official coin term for it. What this means is it is now in play, active 100%. It is not in stasis. And for this turn and this turn only, it gets unblockable. Of note, you can't attack with it that turn because even though it doesn't have charge, it has been in play already. So it counts as already being in play. So you can attack with it the turn it comes out of shifted or quote unquote it's emerged. The main thing is that it gets unblockable for that turn. So you have an opening to attack with it should you so choose. But all right, guys, that are the 3 new mechanics for the set. And I'll be discussing them in depth as we get to card by card basis. All right, so let's jump right into the commons and uncommons. I do want to talk about a quick cycle that's actually great for us to talk about them early because they are not necessarily cards. They're kind of bonuses. They're power. So first up, as you guys can see on the screen, are the coins. Coins are kind of taking a pseudo relative waystone slot where it gives you something for a power. A couple of things to note. There's one for each color, or each faction. So granite, amber, emerald, cobalt, and amethyst. They all come into play depleted, regardless of what you do. Whether you meet the requirements or not, they come in depleted. So that is a change from the waystones. They each give you an influence of that respective color. So granite gives you red, emerald gives you green influence, etc., etc. And then their triggered ability has onslaught. So whenever you attacked, a unit you control attacks or uses killer, then you activate the ability on these coins and they give you a small incremental advantage. The red is deal 1 damage to an enemy. Doesn't matter if it's a player or a unit. So that might come in handy considering the shift might create a lot of 1 health units. Amber gives you a 1/1 wisp. Emerald gives you a +1/+1 weapon to place on one of your units. Cobalt gives you an inferiority complex, which is a curse you place on an enemy unit and it gains reckless. And then the amethyst deals 1 damage to an enemy player and you gain 1 health. So it is a drain effect. So out of all these, I feel like granite, amber, and emerald coins are going to be the strongest, with the granite coin probably being the top notch because I feel like you can, if you guys remember Pitfall Trap from the last format, there's always places to place 1 damage. And then sometimes putting a +1/+1 weapon on a unit will allow you to twist it an additional time. So that is relevant. And I think the weakest one is probably going to be the shadow, where it only drains you for 1 or drains your opponent for 1. I don't really see that being a huge impact on the board, but hey, it's nice to have. It takes the power slot of a power. I do like these. Anytime you are able to replace a spell in your deck with a power or vice versa, then it is essentially allowing you to have an extra card in your deck where you normally wouldn't. For example, you typically run 18 power, so you are limited to the amount of spells and units you can have in your deck. But if one of those power slots is also taken up by a spell, i.e. like with these coins, then you are essentially adding an extra card or half a card to your deck. So there is benefit to that. I have heard some talk of people splashing, quote unquote, splashing these cards, their coins in their deck, even if they are not in that color, because there is no faction requirement as there was for the Waystones. It doesn't, so you can have an emerald coin in a Stone Scar deck and you will gain the green influence, but as long as you attacked with a unit that turn, you will still be able to get the onslaught trigger in place of +1/+1 on one of your units. So that is something to consider. I'm not very high on that, considering that they are semi-weak cards, but I guess if you're solid in 2 colors, maybe having a 1 coin splash or something isn't that bad. That being said, I place these at a 2.5. Reason being is they're not impactful enough for me to want to take them high. I'm pretty much going to look for them later in the picks, somewhere from early mid pack to late pack to pick them up. And at the end of the day, they are still just power and depleted and not fixing. So I give them a 2.5. I could easily see them going to a 2 as well. So that's the coins. The next cycle I would like to talk about, which is once again power, and these are at the uncommon level. That's right, I have to remember to distinguish between common and uncommon, is the insignias. The insignias include 5 factions. I don't know how we're identifying them, so I'll just say them. They are the Praxis, Time Fire, Stone Scour, Fire Shadow, Combre, Time Justice, Uru, Primal Justice, and Feln, Primal Shadow insignias, correction. So each insignia will give you 1 influence of each of those respective factions. So Stone Scar will give you, like I said, fire and shadow, and etc, etc. Now, the extra text on it says depleted if you have any cards from other factions in your deck. So if you are running straight 2 colors, period, then these will come into play undepleted, which is phenomenal. They're fixing, they come into play untapped, so to speak, or active, and you don't have to do that much any restrictions while you're playing them to get that benefit. What this also means is anytime you are going to try to splash for a 3rd faction, then these lose some value. I will say they don't become completely unplayable because of the fact they will always be depleted, whether you've played that card or not. It just has to be in your deck, but sometimes the fixing is worth it. So I think they're fine. They are, I guess it kind of plays out on how important you want to be 2 colors in this format, or essentially how much people typically splash a 3rd color, or how often they show up. These are uncommon, so you aren't going to see them all that much. And knowing that we're not really playing into tricolor factions like we were in the last format, fixing is good, just not as high of a pick. So I put the insignias at 2. Reason being is you're going to be seeing these mainly in pack 1 and 4. You are going to be seeing them in packs 1 and 4. And you won't necessarily know if you're going to be in a 3rd color until 2 and 3. So taking these kind of early in pack 1 might not really pan out the way you want them to. So that's why I put them at a 2. That being said, I think they're going to be awesome for constructed, and everyone's going to probably want to pick them. But yeah, guys, that is the 2 cycles that I wanted to go over. There are a couple more that are in the rare and stuff like that. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to our first color. All right, so our first color is going to be fire or red. And starting off, going down the list from the Eternal Warcry list, we have Brens Scrying. So Brens Scrying is a slow spell for 1 red. It has warp and you scout. Yeah, I don't really think scouting is worth a card on its own. Granted, it only costs 1 and it has warp, so you can draw it off the top of your deck. But and there are Scout Matters synergies in this format, but I don't really think, when you can get plenty of Scout incidentally off of other cards that we'll be talking about later, I don't really feel like taking an entire card out of your deck just to Scout is really worth it. So yeah, I'm not very high on Brens Scrying. So with that, I'm going to give it a 1. You pretty much don't want to have it in your deck if you can absolutely help it. Moving on, next up is Char. Char is a fast spell for 1 red and deal 2 damage to an enemy. So it is the infamous Shock from Magic the Gathering, if you guys play that. And this card is great. Reason being is 1 power for 2 damage at fast speed means that it can help smaller units trade up in combat. It can take out pesky flyers. It can even go face if your opponent has some kind of relic weapon or if they're low on health. The versatility of it is really gives it its strength, especially being at fast speed. Only being 1 power is phenomenal, and yeah, I mean, it's only 2 damage, but there's plenty of instances where that 2 damage can come in handy. It definitely helps a slower deck manage a more aggressive opponent as well. So yeah, I think it's very efficient removal, so I give Char a 4. That being said, I would like to keep it in context. It is only 2 damage, so you're not going to be like taking it over like premium removal like that we'll be talking about later on. Next up, we have a Needle Spitter. This is a 0/3 beast for 1 red. So very aggressive curve so far for red, considering we've had 3 1-drops or 1 spells. But when you scout, Needle Spitter gets a +3 attack this turn. So one thing to note, it isn't just a flat +3. If you have managed to figure out how to scout 2 times in a turn, it will be a 6/3. So there's an upside. That being said, though, I feel like even if you're aggressive, I mean, you could potentially have this guy be a 3/3 for several turns and get in there, and it being a 1-drop is nice, but drawing it late in the game, it kind of does nothing. And the fact that it's an okay defender at best, if you're not able to scout, you have to do some stuff just for it to attack. I'm not very high on it. I don't think Needle Spitter does a lot of work. Granted, I have not played a lot of this format, so I could be wrong, and it could be super easy to trigger this guy. But for right now, I'm gonna give it a 2. I don't think you're wrong for putting it in your deck, but I don't think you're excited to do it because, like I said, when you're top decking, this card is just gonna be absolutely atrocious, especially late in the game. You really want to see it on like turn 1 or 2 when you have the maximum amount of chances to scout, but. Yep, so giving Needle Spitter a 2. Next up, we have an interesting card, which is Oni Patrol. This is a 2/1 Oni Soldier for 1 red. And it has Onslaught +1/+1 permanently. So, turn 1, it's a 2/1. So that works just fine. Then later in the game, even as turn 2 or 3, if you end up having something on the board and you're able to attack, then you get a 3/2 for 1. And that seems pretty good. I think they probably synergize pretty well off of each other just because you can play 1 on turn 1 and then 1 on turn 2. The fact that it costs 1 means that you can play a 3/2 essentially anywhere up your curve. You know, on turn 3 you can play a 2-drop in this, or you can remove something in this and stuff like that. So that comes in handy. That being said, I don't think it's great. Obviously, once again, in the late game, it is at best just going to be a 3/2 vanilla. So I gave Oni Patrol a 3. Though I do think aggressive decks are definitely going to want it. This card now is quite the doozy. So we have Blurry Chaser. This is a 1/3 Yeti Explorer for 2 and a red. It has Quick Draw. And then you pay 1 and twist, i.e. giving it +1/-1 to stats. And Blurry Chaser to scout. So this card actually seems pretty impressive to me. Reason being is it's a 1/3 on turn 2, so it can block and do some things. You're able to slap an equipment on it or a weapon. It has Quick Draw, which is always a bonus, right? But you're also able to twist to clean up your draws in the early game, and only costs 1. I think I really value any twist costs that are 1, or any twist effects that cost 1, because it's very efficient and you can do them as many or as few times as you want. It's very easy to put them in their turn without essentially costing you the turn. And the fact that this guy twists early means you can make sure you're either scouting your extra sigils to the bottom or making sure you're hitting your sigil drops if you're in a low power count deck. And at the end of the day, it becomes a 3/1 quick draw, which is quite relevant if we remember the Recruit. from the last set. So I like Blurry Chaser. I like him quite a bit. I have no problem taking him a little bit higher. So I placed Blurry Chaser at a 3. Obviously, if you can slap some kind of anything on it to increase its health so you can twist more, this card becomes pretty busted. But yeah, Blurry Chaser, you got a 3. I'm going to be excited to play you. Next up, we have Cinder Sprite. This is a 4/3 elemental sprite for 2 and a red. So something's got to be up here, right? The text box says charge, which is nice, and overwhelm, which is also nice. So yeah, this is definitely pushed. Oh, it's at uncommon. I'm sorry. I need to start saying that since I'm doing the common at uncommon. And this is our first uncommon for red. And the rest of the text box says at the end of your turn or when Cinder Sprite deals damage, sacrifice it. So you're essentially playing 2 power. So Cinder Sprite is never going to block because it's destroyed at the end of your turn. So it's not one of those things like you can just not attack with it and wait, you know, to take it out later. It's pretty much going to be dead at the end of your turn one way or another. So the most common line of play would be to play this and attack, triggering onslaught, especially because it's 2 later in the game. You're able to cast other things. Maybe potentially get in there for a little bit of damage because it does have overwhelm, but either way, it's going down. I'm not seeing it. I don't really see it. If this thing was like a 6/1 or something, I might be a little more on board since it's gonna die anyways. I'm not really sure why they had to give it the 3 toughness or health, since anytime it deals damage, it just dies. Period. So it could deal damage to a unit, deal damage to a player, it dies. I'm not really sure about it. So I went ahead and gave Cinder Sprite a 2. I can see some people putting 1 or 2 of these in your deck, mainly just to kind of push through damage towards the end. You know, when you have a go wide strategy, you want to drop this charge unit, you can play this and another unit in the same turn and get in there. But 4 damage just doesn't seem that great, especially when your opponent has a chance to either block it or not, depending on what works best for them. So yeah, Cinder Sprite, you get a 2. Next up, we have Daring Maneuver at common. This is a fast spell for 2 red. And give a unit +2/+2 and overwhelm this turn. So if those of you that are used to pummel, the +2/+2 in a red deck is absolutely phenomenal. It does a lot more work than you think. But the fact that it also gets overwhelmed makes this card really solid. Reason being is, in a lot of times, you're going to use the +2/+2 to let one of your small units, like your Oni Patrol or your Blurry Chaser, not die in combat and trade up. But that still prevents damage from going to their face. But with it having overwhelm as well tacked on it, it means that not only is your guy going to probably survive combat, also kill their unit, but also deal some damage to their face anyway. So you're not really getting behind on tempo, and you're able to kind of continue to get it in there. I think this is going to be a very solid combat trick for aggressive decks. Of note, you can play on defense as well. Pummel is specifically on attackers, but Daring Maneuver, you're paying the extra power for overwhelm and the ability to do it on defense. So that is relevant. So I gave Daring Maneuver 4. I think very low to the ground aggressive decks are going to be super high on it. And I like it. Next up, we have Guns Blazing. This is a... There we go. Guns Blazing is a fast spell for 2 and a red. It has Warp, which is going to be a theme in this set. And give a unit quick draw this turn. Yeah, I'm not really excited about this card. Reason being is you're paying 2 power. We just saw a 2 power fast spell that gives +2/+2 stats. This does nothing for stats. It only gives quick draw. So the unit already has to have a high attack power for it to be relevant. It does have warp, so it's essentially like drawing a card off your deck, off the top of your deck. But it also, quick draw is also an offensive only mechanic. So essentially you want to have a unit that's big enough, that has big enough attack to trade with one of their units, and you have to be in a position to attack with it. I feel like it's just too much stipulation. So, once again, I'm not gonna fault you for putting. Actually, never mind. I was gonna give it a 2, but I think Guns of Blazing is a 1. You just don't want to be playing this in your deck. It's too situational. You need to have three things able to happen for it to be relevant, i.e. a unit with high enough attack, a unit that is able to attack, and actually, yeah, I guess that's the only two, my bad. I guess have it top of your deck or something like that. Or your opponent have unit, like nothing that has toughness higher than the attack of your unit, etc. So yeah, I spent too much time on it. Guns blazing, you get a 1. Moving on, next card is Horde Duelist. This is a 2/2 warrior at common for 2 and a red, and it has charge. Yeah, I think this card is solid. Once again, we're seeing a very aggressive theme so far from Fire, and I think it's fantastic. This card is going to obviously be great on turn 2, and then it also is solid later up in the curve if you're able to still attack, or if you have some kind of combat trick, because you can play it, enable charge, and still play something else in that turn, or just the fact that it sneaks in extra damage when your opponent wasn't prepared for it is fantastic. That being said, it is still a 2/2. So I'm going to give Horde Duelist a 3, but it is a solid curve filler. I like that card quite a bit. Next up, this is an interesting card. We have Impatient Pyromage. It's a 2/2 mage at uncommon for 2 and a red as well. Plenty of 2-drops going on here. And it has Onslaught. Draw a card and reduce its cost by 1 this turn. At the end of your turn, discard it. So, for those of you that play Magic, once again, to make another reference, this is very similar to Abbot of Carol Keep. This is a solid 2-drop. I like this card, and I'll tell you why. So you play it on curve. It is a 2/2 for 2. That's great. Fills up your curve. It's awesome. Later in the game, you are still going to get that 2/2 body, but if you are able to trigger its Onslaught, it will draw you a card off the top of your deck, and you're able to play it. And it being a 2 cost means, once again, you could play that card at the same turn. Granted, there is a slight downside at the fact that you have to play that card that turn, and you're not sure to know what it is, because it could be like a pump spell. So that would be a little disadvantageous, but that's kind of like the Fire mentality, where they are going to give you cards, but at some kind of limitation or price. But the fact that this draws you an additional card later in the game for minimal work, red wants to be attacking anyways, means that it's pretty good. It's not just a dead draw later in the game, like, oh great, I drew a top deck of 2/2. You could potentially top deck something else on top of it and make it a little bit cheaper, which helps with the fact that you did have to cast the Impatient Pyromage here. So I think it's solid. I think it's a good card. I think you're happy about having it in your deck regardless, even if it is just a 2/2. So I gave Impatient Pyromage a 3.5. Like I said, plenty of times you're going to play it just as a 2/2 for 2, but sometimes you get an extra card out of it, and it comes quite in handy. Moving right along, we have Ruins Guide. This is a 2/2 Explorer at uncommon for 2 and a red. And this card, I'm glad I managed to play with it, because it did throw me off a little bit. So it says, when one of your units emerges, which is coming out of shift, like the last tick, the shift tick mark wears off and they have unblockable and they're able to attack, Ruin Guide gets plus health, or plus attack plus health equal to that of the unit's attack and health. So for example, if you are in Praxis and you emerge the 6/6, then Ruins Guide will get a +6/+6, becoming an 8/8 for the turn. Now notice, I did say for the turn. The text box actually does not say that. So I initially thought it just keeps adding to it. So I rated this thing quite highly. That being said, it is until end of turn, but it does some work. This card does do some work. I have managed to play with it, and I like it quite a bit. I did have it at a 4 when I thought it like just got up there and just crushed. That being said, it being in the turn will mean it will get it in there. The downside to it is the fact that the opponent will see it coming, and they can either handle Ruin Guide before the shift happens, or the fact that they could play around it somewhat. So I do bump Ruins Guide back down to a 3 from a 4, but it does get in there quite a bit. I mean, if you're even just emerging the 3/4 that we'll talk about later in red, then this guy is going to be a 5/6 and can get in there quite a bit, and that's one heck of a 2-drop. So actually, you know what, yeah, I will bump it back up to 4. I'll bump it back up to 4. Granted, you know, you need to have some shift in your deck, So it isn't going to be super high because obviously you're not going to have a deck full of shift. But I mean, I feel like if you can trigger this thing 2 times, it'll get in there for as a 2/2 a couple times. And then it'll get in there pumped a couple times. So yeah, I like Ruin Guide. I think it's a solid pick. Moving along, we have Slag. What is going on with my thing? Hold on a second, guys. There we go. So Slag is a fast spell at uncommon for 2 and a red. And it says A, kill an enemy relic, or B, kill an enemy sentinel. So if this was in the last set, this would be super awesome because it would pretty much be a annihilate almost. But in this format, I have not come across too many sentinels that matter, and relics are a thing in like Argenport because they use a lot of weapons, but it isn't super great. So that being said, I don't think the versatility of Slag is there. It is a powerful card in the right format or against the right decks, but the fact that there's plenty of times where you come up against decks that don't have sentinels or relics means that Slag is not that great. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2. Because notice it does say relics, so it does not destroy attachments or weapons on units. It only destroys stuff that is on your opponent. So I might actually even give it a 1. Yeah, I'm going to be a little aggressive here and just give it a 1. I don't think you want to be playing this at all if you can help it. Like, it just seems too narrow of a thing, even with having 2 modes, and you rather just have a card that's efficient all the time. Like, to include a 2/2 could at least chump block like a sentinel if that happens or whatnot, and can block everything else. All right, next up we have Stronghold of Vandal. This is a 3/1 warrior at uncommon for 2 and a red, and it says shift 3, kill an enemy attachment. So if you just play it as a 3/1 for 2, nothing happens. But if you wait an extra turn and shift it, then you are able to kill an enemy attachment. This includes, you know, relics as well as relic weapons and weapons on units. So this is not bad. I actually like this card quite a bit. Reason being, a 3/1 for 2 is pretty aggressive. It's okay. It's going to trade up sometimes, especially if you have like some pump spells to get it in there if they try to chump block it or whatnot. But later in the game, you can, or even right away, I mean, wait 1 turn and shift on turn 3 to get rid of something annoying on an opponent, and you're still going to get a 3/1 that can get in there at least 1 time when it emerges, because remember, emerging gives them unblockable for a turn. Yeah, I think the versatility of this card is solid here. It's a lot more flexible than Slag, and you are getting a relevant body on it. So I like Stronghold Vandal. I'm going to give it a 3. So this next card is quite interesting, but I do like it. I've managed to play with it a little bit, and it does some work. And this card is Zuberi's Longbow. Zuberi's Longbow is a +2/+1 weapon, so you throw it on a unit at uncommon for 2 and a red. And when you scout, sacrifice Zuberi's Longbow to have it the wielder deal 3 damage to an enemy. So there is a little bit of awkwardness in this card in the fact that sometimes you're going to play, like, for example, a burn spell that we're going to talk about later that scouts. And so it will break this at fast speed. But there are instances where you can slap this on a unit, get in there for some damage, especially if you have some pump spells, and then later in the game break it to deal 3 damage to the opponent's face or a pesky flyer or something like that. So this card does do some work. I do like it. I think it's pretty good, especially in red. Like, for example, you slap this on the Blurry Chaser we were talking about earlier, and then it has quick draw as well as extra attack, and it does some work. The fact that you can scout also at fast speed does mean that you can attack with this, and if your opponent ends up like using some kind of pump spell or combat trick to win combat with whatever unit has the longbow on it, you could break the longbow at fast speed to kill the unit that they're pumping or to deal 3 damage to the face or another unit. So it does have some versatility to it. It being a weapon, though, you do need other units to make it happen, and that also dictates how good or bad it is. So I gave Zuberi's Longbow a 3, but it is a really solid card. Moving right along, we have Call to Arms. Call to Arms is a fast spell at uncommon for 3 and a red. And it has warp, and play a 1/+1 attack weapon on 2 of your units. Yeah, I mean, Renown is not in the format, and I don't know. I think there's better ways to be spending your power on this. You're spending 3 power to essentially add 2 attack to the board. It is at instant speed or fast speed, so that is a thing, and it is a weapon, so they stick around. But I haven't had a reason. I've drafted this card a couple times, haven't really had a reason to put it in my deck. I end up cutting it quite a bit, especially in a format where you have twist. Like sometimes it's actually more valuable to have higher health than it is more attack. So yeah, I'm not really high on Call to Arms, but I won't fault anyone for playing it, so I'm giving it a 2. Next up, we have Sensari Dervish. There we go. I don't know why I was having a hard time saying this card on stream. I finally got to play with this card one time. But either way, this card is busted. It is a 3/2 Centaur Gunslinger. That's right. Horse, half man, half horse, all gunslinger. At uncommon, for 3 and a red. It has charge, which is awesome. And then pay 2 and twist Sensari Dervish to exhaust an enemy unit. So this card is awesome in a red aggressive deck. Reason being is it has charge, which is always nice. And as early as turn 5, you can play it, turn it into a 4/1, take one of your opponent's solid blockers out of the way, and get in there. And yeah, this card is just everything red aggressive decks want to be doing. Once again, it gets a unit off the board. You could also figure out, slap a weapon on it or pump it somehow pre-combat to take out more than 1 unit. And worst case scenario, you can go ahead and twist it twice, killing it, but taking 2 blockers out of the way to finish off your opponent. I think Sensari Dervish is fantastic. The fact that it has charge means it's great. If it's an open board, you don't even have to twist it. You could just get in there. It adds to the board. So I like it. I like it quite a bit. I think this is one of the key finishers for the fire decks. So I'm giving Sensari Dervish a 4. I think you're very excited to have this in your deck. Next up, we have Cover Fire Marksman. And this is a 2/2 Gunslinger at uncommon for 3 and a red. And there we go. And it has double damage, which is awesome. So obviously in red with all these combat tricks and things like that, this guy can get a hand very quickly. Especially if it gets unblocked, you can definitely do some serious damage. But it has shift 5. So you can play this on turn 3, or you could play this for 5 later on in the game. And give one of your other units double damage until Cover Fire Marksman emerges. So this is one of the cycles that we have in this format, where they are, I think they're all 3/3s, if I believe correctly. If not, it's fine. But they all shift for 5 to give an ability or a bonus in stats to another unit while they are shifted. The red one, obviously, that we just read is double damage. I think this card is great. 2/2 for 3 is not exactly what you want to be doing in red, but the fact that it's double damage means that you're kind of low on stats but higher on damage. So you're getting 4 damage minimum for a 3 drop, so that's pretty solid. And the fact that late game you could slap it on one of your bigger units or slap it on a smaller unit to get in there until it dies to trade up, and then this guy will have double damage as well. Or you can put it on one of your evasive units. Yeah, this card is great. Plus of note that once you shift it, when it emerges, it will have unblockable. So it could just get in there for 4 or 8 if you have daring maneuver and stuff like that. So I like Cover Fire Marksman quite a bit. I think it's going to do a lot of work, more so than you think. So I'm giving it a 4. Up next, we have Nimble Conscript. And this guy, I think, is one of the key cards to the aggressive decks. It is fantastic. It is a 3/4 for Soldier at common for 3 and a red. It has a Reckless, and it has Shift 1. That's right. So you can either play this guy anywhere in your curve for either or. You could play it on turn 3, and it gets in there on turn 4. The fact that it is high toughness or high health, I think, will help it deal with the Reckless a little bit better, because of the fact that it is 4 health is pretty relevant and significant in this format. But the fact that you can play it on turn 1 makes it super strong. And like I said, it does trigger the ruins guides that we talked about earlier. I think this card is great. It does the work. You're getting 3-4 worth of stats for 3, which is great already. It forces your opponent to really have to make some interesting blocks, and if you have any kind of pump spells, this thing just continuously gets in there. Yeah, I like it. And once again, the fact that you can play it on turn 1, play a 2-drop, and then still play a 3-drop and get in there means this card is really good for the curve. That being said, it is, at the end of the day, just kind of a 3-4 vanilla for the most part. So I am giving it a 3. There's some insanely fun cards, though, in red, for sure. Like, this next one is a really good one, which is Sizzleback Salamander. This is a 2/2 beast at common for 3 in a red. It has Berserk, and you can twist it for 4, or pay 4 and twist Sizzleback to deal 2 damage to enemy player. So, this guy, once again, combos well with pump spells, because you can twist. Now, I will say twist 4 is relevant. That is a very high twist cost. There is a good chance, especially in red decks, that this might take your entire turn just to twist it, or at least take up the majority of it with your power. Best case scenario, you have 6 power, you can twist this and then still have a pump spell for it. The fact that it has Berserk does come into play sometimes. If you have a chance for this guy to get in there and you can Berserk him, you can pump him once or twice and get in there for a ton of damage. You twist him once, he's already a 3/1, so if you Berserk, he can get in there for essentially 8 that turn. So Sizzleback Salamander, even though it's a 2/2 for 3, does do some work. It can be a decent finisher as well if you are in some kind of deck that can continuously pump his health, so he can keep reaching out there and dealing 2 damage to the opponent. Of note, it combos really well with Cover Fire Marksman. Having double damage means every twist will do 4 damage, and then the Berserk is just absolutely backbreaking. So yeah, Sizzle Salamander, solid card. Don't think you're gonna be picking it too highly though. There are some more aggressive cards you can be picking, but it does give you a decent amount of reach. So I did have an opponent deal like 16 damage to me with this because they pumped it twice and used Berserk and had twist on it, so it did quite a bit of damage, and I learned my lesson. But those are a little more corner case-ish, I think. So yeah, Sizzleback Salamander, solid, giving it a 3. All right, next up we have a really solid card. I do like this one quite a bit. I think it is premium removal for the fire decks, which is Streets of Flame. Streets of Flame is a fast spell at common for 3 in a red. It deals 3 damage, period. So it can go to a unit or to face, and it has Scout, which we just established has some synergies in this format. There are cards that care about scouting. I like this card. I think it is great. Reason being is, at the very least, you're typically going to get your power back, killing 3 drops and 2 drops with it. Occasionally, you can even take out some 4 drops if they have low health. We are in a world of twist, so you're going to see a lot more units with high attack and low health. So Streets of Flame will do some work there. And the fact that it's Scouts is really nice because you can keep this early, take out an early unit, and scout to make sure you're still hitting your sigils or your power plays. So I think it is a really solid card. The fact that you can draw it late and just go face to finish off your opponent means it's pretty relevant. You're doing 3 damage for 3 power, which is a good rate. So yeah, I like Streets of Flames. I think you're happy to play as many of these in your deck as you can. So I give Streets of Flame a 4. I didn't give it a 5 simply because of the fact that it doesn't kill everything. So yeah, I typically save my 5s for bombs that either win you the game, bring you back from being behind, or they just straight up premium removal that is a really good rate to kill absolutely everything. But once again, it is 4, and like I said, you're more than happy to play as many as you can in your deck. Next up, we have Tantrum. Tantrum is a slow spell at uncommon. It's 3 in a red, and it says deal 2 damage to an enemy, period. Tantrum has double damage and overwhelm if you have a shifted unit. So if you have a unit that is shifted at the moment, Tantrum will deal 4 damage to an enemy, and if it ends up being a unit, whatever damage, any damage excess of killing that unit will roll over and hit to your opponent in the face. I think this card is medium. Yeah, like I said, I think it has some upside, but paying 3 power just to deal 2 damage doesn't seem that exciting. And I think there are going to be times where that is going to be necessary. So, I don't know. I think you can do better, especially after seeing a flame at common. Being able to deal 3 damage period is always great. So, and this is a slow spell. So, you can't do it like in the middle of combat. You have to do it after combat or before. Yeah, I'm not very high on Tantrum. I could be wrong, but I think most of the time it's going to be very situational and may or may not fit the situation. So I'm going to give Tantrum a 2. It just has a few stipulations on it that may or may not like do some work. So this card is actually surprisingly better than it looks, and this is a Mining Team. Mining Team is a 2/2 Grenadin at common for 4 and a red. So they're a little bit overcosted for the stats for sure, but it has Warp, it has Shift 2, and it has Summon Scout. So you have 3 different ways of getting this guy into play, and you get a Scout for your troubles. And it's actually surprisingly been fairly good, and you're okay putting it in most of your decks. I don't think you want a deck full of them, but yeah, the fact that you can warp it off the top of your deck, then you scout to get something more relevant up there. You can shift it on turn 2, so you still could potentially play it as a 2/2 or for 2 and get your scout going. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. This card isn't busted or anything. It's just surprisingly better than you would think. So yeah, I like Mining Team. I gave it a 3. I think it's an okay filler. You don't mind playing a couple of these if you have to. I wouldn't play too many of them. 2 would probably be the top that I would want to play, because at the end of the day, you're still paying 4 for 2. But the fact that it has Shift 2 makes it a little more relevant. The Scout is not something to ignore. Sorry guys, get a drink of water real quick. Interesting. That's the thing about doing podcasts by myself. There's no tactical pause or gap I can do while my co-host is speaking. But it's okay. I don't mind. I like getting stuff out for you guys. All right, so next up we have Outlaw Ringleader. Let me write it down. Outlaw Ringleader. And this guy is a 3/3 Gunslinger Rogue at uncommon for 4 red. And it has pay 4 and twist Outlaw Ringleader to give one of your other units +4 attack this turn. And then it has Onslaught, play a 2/1 Drifter. So this card is pretty darn good. I like it quite a bit. Reason being is you're paying, technically in most cases scenarios, you're paying 4 for 5/4 worth of stats across 2 bodies, which is a really good rate. I have stated that paying 4 is a high twist cost. It will take up most of your turns in some cases, but +4 health attack is quite relevant, especially since it automatically gives you a body to slap it on, which is the 2/1 Drifter it gets. So you're attacking with a 6/1. That thing will trade up most of the time. But I mean, you're assuming late game. Granted, it does die to everything. But that's just the base level. You could also twist a flyer. So giving 4 attack to a flyer is extremely relevant, or something with Overwhelm, or something like your Blurry Chaser with that has Quick Draw. So I think the versatility of this card is quite well. As soon as you twist it, becomes a 4/2, then you twist again, becomes a 5/1. So that's not something the gawk at, or not. It's pretty relevant as well. So I like Outlaw Ringleader. I think it is versatile and will fit your curve quite nicely. So I gave, and it's a great finisher as well. Like I said, if your opponent's already low on health, you can twist it twice. I mean, that is 8. I don't think you're gonna have 8 power open on a red deck, so probably not. But still, it will help you push through damage, it being a relevant body itself. So I gave Outlaw Ringleader a 4. Oh, excuse me, guys. Next up, we have Combustion Brawler. This is a 6/4 elemental at uncommon for 5 red. It has Overwhelm, and the enemy players can't gain health, which I believe is not that relevant in this format. I think there's a couple of things with lifesteal, but most of the stuff has armor, gain armor because of the synergies in Argenport. And then it has shift 4, exhaust an enemy unit. So yeah, I think this card does some work. I really do. 6-4 worth of stats for 5 with overwhelm is a solid body. You're getting a good rate on that. It will get in there, and then it combos really well with combat tricks. And the fact that you can shift it a turn early, making it unblockable, so that's 6 points of damage unblockable later on, and to take out one of your opponent's blockers on turn 3 or 4 makes it quite relevant as well there, where you can get in some extra damage early, and then when it comes out of shift, it gets in damage late. It being a big body, even if it does trade, it will do some damage to the face. I like Combustion Brawler. It is a 5-drop, so I don't think you're going to be picking it too highly. But yeah, Combustion Brawler will definitely do some work. I think you're happy to have it in your deck. And it's always nice when you can get out a little bit sooner for that added bonus. So yeah, Combustion Brawler, you are getting a 3. Next up, we have Rallying Sergeant. Rallying Sergeant is a 4/4 Oni Warrior at common for 5 red, and it has Onslaught plus 3 attack permanently. So on the ground level, it is a 4/4 for 5, which is medium. You're not upset about it, but you're not super happy about it. But if you are able to trigger Onslaught, which seems like most fire decks are going to be able to do, you will get a 7/4 for 5. So yeah, that's even better stats than the Brawler. Granted, it is does not have Overwhelm, so sometimes it will just trade and not deal damage to the face, but that is quite relevant. And I feel like I'm saying relevant a lot, so I'm going to try to stop that. Having 7 power does mean it trades up with a lot of things, especially if you're going up against time with big dinosaurs. And if they just don't block it, that is a ton of damage that you can push through. From what I've gathered in this format, you want to stay a little bit low of a curve, so you're not going to have too many 5s. But this card can get in there. It can do some damage, and it's good on defense, obviously, if you're able to trigger that as well. That being said, I think... Excuse me. Guess it's getting a little too late. It is still just a filler. So, yeah. Rallying Sergeant, you are getting a 3. Next up, we have one of our more spicy cards. It's already seeing a lot of hype amongst the drafting community, which is Heretic's Cannon. Heretic's Cannon is a +2/+2 weapon at uncommon for 6 and a red. It has Overwhelm, but here's the trick. When the wielder attacks, double its attack this turn. Yeah, this card is just busted. It absolutely can win games, especially the fact that it has Overwhelm. Like, for example, let's say you just put it on your Rallying Sergeant, right? It's a 6/6. Let's say you don't even onslaught it, right? You just played the Rally Sergeant for no value or for no onslaught trigger, so it's a 4/4. You play the Heretic's Cannon on, it's a 6/6. It attacks as a 12/6. And it has Overwhelm. Yeah, this card is just nuts. Especially if you can add some pump spells to it and things like that. Like, you put this on a flyer. This card just deals so much damage out of nowhere. And it essentially has charge because you're placing it on the unit and you're attacking with that unit right away. Your opponent is really hard pressed to get in there. This is great against other red decks because you're both just kind of not blocking, taking swings at each other. Yeah. Heretic's Cannon can win you the game. It is solid. You're happy to play it. So that being said, I gave Heretic's Cannon a 5. I think you're super excited to have this in your deck. It's good on flyers. It's just busted. Yeah, Heretic's Cannon, you are awesome. I have not had the chance to play with it yet. I have played against it, and boy, let me tell you, it definitely makes you sweat some. All right, next up, one of our last cards, getting down to the home stretch for fire here. We have Outdraw. This is a slow spell at common for 6 and a red. Deal 4 damage to an enemy unit. So that's a little high. I would kind of be okay paying 5 for this. Paying 4 or 6 is a little high, but it says Onslaught, you get +4 power this turn. So essentially, if you're doing it post combat, this will only cost you. You still need 6 power initially, but it will only cost you 2 in the long run. So you're still able to make other plays later in that turn. So it won't get a blocker out of the way. It might get a bigger blocker out of the way if you had to sacrifice one of your units to one of their bigger guys. You can finish it off with this, or you can go face. So the card isn't bad, but I also don't want too many of them in my deck. It does do some work. The fact that there's 2 better burn spells in the format does make this thing a little less appealing. So yeah, I think I'm going to give Outdraw a 2.5 because, like I said, because of the fact we have Streets of Flame and we have the Char, I'm hard pressed to value this at a 3, but at the same time, I think it is a little bit better than a 2 card like that you want to avoid putting in your deck. So Outdraw, yeah, you're gonna get 2.5 for me because you're fine. It's not bad. If you're in your deck, no one's gonna knock you for it. But yeah, Outdraw, you get a 2.5. Moving on to Clan Barracks. So this card is very interesting. This is a 7 cost relic at uncommon for 7 red, and it says when you scout, play a 4/4 warrior, and onslaught scout. So 7 is a lot. It is a whole lot, especially in an aggressive red deck. I don't think you're going to be playing this card. That being said, once again, like I told you, there are various cards that we've already seen that has scout built into them. So with at the very least, this should typically make you a 4/4 when you play it. I think you would want to even sacrifice one of your smaller units to get that upgrade to the 4/4. If you have a method of repeatable scout, whether it's a blurry chase or something like that, and you start spitting out multiple 4/4s, I think this card can take over the game fairly easily. I played it 1 time so far. I've drafted it 3 times and only played it once, and it was in a Praxis deck because I had the cryptic etchings where I was able to literally have this and the etchings out and then scout every turn. So I was just spitting out, and I think I had a Horn of Plenty actually, so I was spitting out 5/5s for 2 every turn, and yeah, needless to say, I won that game. That being said though, like I said, if you play this later in the game, you've already used up some of your scouts. It's only, I think you're happy with this if you get 3 triggers off of it. If you get 2, you're getting 8/8 worth of stats for 7, which isn't bad, but you did need to do some work. I guess it's not bad. If you attacked anyways, you get a scout off of playing it, and then you scout one more time. I think it kind of did its work, you know. 7 cost card, put 2 4/4s into play isn't too bad. I think you really want to do it at least 3 before you really feel like you got there. And then obviously if you can repeat it multiple times, it's great. So that being said, I think I wanted to give it a 3, but I think actually Clan Barracks is a 2. It can win the game, but I think it's very dependent on how much scout you have in your deck. If you only have 2 or 3 scouts, I don't think this card is quite worth it. So that stipulation kind of puts it, well, you are going to play Blurry Chaser, you are going to play your Streets of Flame, but it's at 7, so you've probably used those cards. Yeah, I'm going to give Clan Barracks a 2. I think it's not that good unless you have specific decks that want to go longer and you have multiple scout triggers. I think Praxis probably is going to be the best color for it. All right, our last card for fire is Twin Flame. This is a fast spell at uncommon, and it is 8 power, double red. Ouch. It has warp, and it has deal 4 damage to enemies. That's right, so it can go face in a unit, or it could go 2 units. Yeah, 8 damage for 8 is a good rate, but it is 8. I don't like this card. It has warp. I don't know if I said that or not, but it has warp, so it could be a good top deck late in the game. But man, 8 power, that's a lot. Think if your deck is made to go the long game and you are not, I think if fire is not your primary color, you're using it as a support color, so your deck is probably made to go a little bit longer in the game, you might be okay having one of these in your deck. But gosh, man, I could just see this sitting in your hand for like ever, or it being on the top of your deck. You see it with the warp and just not having 8 power. So yeah, Twin Flame, even though I see it being, I put it at a 2. I think just 8. And then the thing is, it doesn't even kill one thing. Like you're getting 4 damage, but it has to go to 2 different units, or 2 different enemies. So you can't really like kill their 7/7 with it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So Twin Flame, you're gonna get a 2. I might even drop you down to a 1, but I wouldn't fault someone for having one of these in their decks. So yeah, all right, guys, that is fire. Overall, pretty aggressive. Some great cards in there, some not so great cards, but overall, red seems fantastic. I think it's gonna be a very aggressive color, and you're gonna see some low to the ground decks because of it. So up next we have Time, and the first card on the list is Arcanum Elite. This is a 1/1 at common mystic for 1 time. Flying and onslaught, you get, and one of your units get +2 health. This card is actually deceptively better than it looks, mainly because of twist in the format. So it is a 1/1 flyer for 1, which means the evasion will allow you to play it early to potentially get onslaught triggers going, and the fact that if you do have an onslaught trigger, it is able to buff up one of your twist units, so you can twist 2 additional times, as well as giving you a little bit of health as a cushion. I think this card is a solid pickup. You're not taking it too early, and it's not super powerful, but it is deceptively better than it seems. So I gave Arcanum Elite a 3. I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker, guys. I don't want this to be, I know it's going to be a multiple hour podcast, but I don't want it to really be like a 7-hour podcast. That would be absolutely crazy. So cards that really don't do that much, I'm not going to talk too much about them. Next up, we have Phase Out. This is a slow spell at common for 1 at a time, and choose a unit and shift it. So you can shift your units as well as your opponent's units. So that being said, it is mainly in an aggressive fashion or deck. You use it to get one of their big blockers out of the way for 3 turns, and hopefully you'll be able to kill them before the unit comes out of shift. You can also shift one of your units to either protect it from removal, or to, if it's a bigger unit and there is a stalled board state, to kind of sneak in extra damage. So I think Phase Out is okay. I think it's better in a constructed format than is limited. So I'm giving Phase Out a 2. I do think it's going to be okay being in some decks, but I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout. And in limited, when sometimes the boards really stall out, I don't think, like I said, unless you're going to have a really aggressive deck, will the 3-turn hiatus be worth it. Next up, we have Potion of Alacrity. Yeah, there you go. We'll go with that. Alacrity. Yeah. Potion of Alacrity. It is a slow spot, uncommon for 1 at a time. It has warp, and your shifted units emerge 1 turn sooner. Yeah, I don't like this card. I think best case scenario, you're gonna have 2 units that they'll be shifted at the same time. Best case scenario, and spending a whole card just to get them out 1 turn sooner. I will say it will potentially throw the math off on your opponent when they're anticipating it not, they have another turn or so. But rarely are you gonna get 2 units to pop out a turn earlier at the same time. Most of the time they're going to be staggered, so I don't think it's worth wasting a card in your deck for it. So I gave Potion of Alacrity a 1. Next up, we have Adolescent Deathjaw, and this is a 3/2 dinosaur at uncommon for 2 at a time. So 3/2 for 2 is already solid. You're getting decent stats. You're getting traded up a little bit, but it has shift 4. So you may shift it for double its normal cost, and you may put an exhausted enemy unit into its owner's hand. So I like this card. I think the fact that you can play it on turn 2 or 3 as a body, and if you draw it later in the game, you could potentially get a unit that your opponent attacked with, which is probably a harder, more difficult unit to deal with, bounce it into their hand. They do play it next turn, but if it is a bigger unit, it could take up their entire turn and potentially set them back on tempo. I like that. So I'm going to give Adolescent Deathjaw a 3. Next up, we have Burden Bear. This is a Burden Bear Wisp, and this is a 1/3 Wisp at uncommon for 2 at a time. It has flying, so we have another cheap onslaught enabler with evasion, and it has onslaught. You may put one of your other units into your hand. I think the utility in this unit is extremely viable. There's going to be plenty of times where you're just going to play a 1/3 flyer for 2. We had that in the last format, or in Defiance format with the I forgot what the name of the Wisp was, but the one that had endurance, and it was just fine. So it's gonna be okay doing this. You could play this, but I think this is gonna combo well with Enter the Battlefield or Summon Effect units. You could bounce it, like for example the Arcanum Elite. You could play Arcanum Elite, swing with it for, play it for no value, swing with it, trigger onslaught, play this, bounce it back in your hand, and now next turn you could play it to add additional health to the board. So yeah, I like this. I think it's going to reset the cycle of the bigger shift 5 units that pump other units for the time they're shifted and things like that. So yeah, I think Burden Bearer Wisp is solid. That being said, I wouldn't value it too highly unless you do have several ways of triggering it. So I'm still going to give a Burden Bearer Wisp a 3. The body is good, but just kind of medium. Next up, and one of the ones that's already seen quite a bit of hype in this format, is Devotee of the Sands. So Devotee of the Sands is a 1/3 for 2 at a time, mage at common. It has shift 2, so the shift cost and the play cost is the same. So pretty much it's just a matter of whether you want to protect it or block with it. And you get 1 maximum power, at 1 additional maximum power. So it ramps you. I think this card is quite good. Once again, if you are not worried about being attacked, you can shift it to make sure it stays around to take advantage of it, since people have that bolt the bird mentality from MTG, where they usually kill early ramp because they realize how much value it has. Or you could play it on turn 2 and just block just fine. Later in the game, it isn't that impressive. Even if you could shift it, you're still only sneaking in 1 damage, and the additional power is not that relevant. So I'm giving Devotee of the Sands a 3. As just a good curve filler, but it is quite relevant. Ramping you a turn is quite awesome. So give it a 3, but I could easily see it being a 3.5 as well. Next up, we have Displaced Oroctodon. That's what I'm gonna go with, Oroctodon. And this is a 2/2 dinosaur at common for 2 at a time, and it has shift 1. And you can summon, or when you summon it, you scout. So this card is great. It is awesome. It is better than it looks. 2/2 for 2 is obviously 100% serviceable, but the fact that it scouts means it is relevant every point in the game. And the fact that you are able to potentially scout on turn 1 with it, if you're not trying to be too aggressive or your opponent isn't trying to be too aggressive, helps clean out your draws in your early game, and then you could get in 2 points of unblockable damage in later. Makes Displaced Oroctodon quite good for a 2-drop, which we're seeing quite a bit of that in this format. So it might lead to a more aggressive format. So yeah, Displaced Oroctodon is solid. But once again, a 2/2, not overtly powerful, not really pulling you into colors. So I'm going to give it a 3. Sudden Stampede is next. This is a fast spell for 2 at a time at common. And it has warp, and your units get overwhelmed this turn. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I don't like mass effects that don't really, like we talked about earlier with the quick draw. Quick draw is even a little more relevant. This card really would only help break a board state if you have a bigger board than your opponent and can get in there and the overwhelm matters. The fact that it doesn't pump stats means that it's not worth a card to me. So I gave Sudden Stampede a 1. Really don't think you want to have this in your deck at all. Moving right along, we do have Blink at common. It is a common fast spell for 3 at a time. It has warp and put a unit into its owner's hand. I like this card. It will do some work. It is a solid way to stop attackers. You can get big blockers out of the way. You can potentially bounce a unit before your opponent is able to twist it. And it also gets rid of weapons or attachments if your opponent's in some kind of aggressive fire deck and they're really beefing up a unit. The fact that it's a fast spell means that you can block with unit, and when they try to pump it to kill yours, you can blink their guy, negating both spells. So it is pretty solid tempo play. I like it. It is 3, which does make it a little expensive. Sometimes the warp comes in handy. I have been double blinked off the top of their deck before, and yeah, that really set me back. But once again, it does not kill the unit, so we're going to give Blink a 3. Next up, we have Bulbous Humbug. So this card is quite impressive. I've managed to find play with it one time, and I do like this card. It is a 1/2 flying insect at uncommon for 3 and a time, and it not only has flying, but says pay 2 and twist a Bulbous Humbug, so it becomes a 2/1 to draw a sigil of your choice from your deck. Yeah, this card is great. It is an evasive unit. So you can just twist it once, it becomes a 2/1 flyer. If you have any way of pumping its health where you can twist it multiple times, you just draw all the sigils and all the fixing of your deck, and you won't have to worry about stalling out. Plus the fact that it just becomes an even bigger threat in the air. So for example, if you +2 it with the elite, now all of a sudden it could go all the way up to a 4/1 in the air while drawing you 3 sigils and fixing your power. Yeah. Bulbous Humbug is a great incentive to go time and splash other colors. So Bulbous Humbug gets a 4 from me. I like that card quite a bit. Next up, we have Expedition Leader. This is a 1/1 Explorer at uncommon. It's for 3 and a time. And it says when one of your units emerges, draw 2 cards. So this is the one of the quote unquote payoffs for the shift deck. 1/1 for 3 is very underwhelming. At least the Oni Ronin, or the Oni Blacksmith, I think it was, that drew you a card for every weapon, was a 2/2. So the stats are very underwhelming. There are going to be plenty of ways to kill it, especially in a world with shift or twist, where a lot of units are going to be going down to 1 health. So it's not very vulnerable. Plus, your opponent has 3 turns essentially to see this coming, so they can deal with it. Obviously, in a perfect world, you'll shift a unit, and then 1 turn before it comes out of shift, or the turn before it comes out of shift, you could play the Expedition Leader to 2 cards back. I think in the best case scenario in games, you're going to be drawing maybe 4 cards off this guy. Which is not something to gawk at, but you're not taking it unless you're already in the emerge or the shift deck, I feel like. So with that, I'm giving Expedition Leader a 2. In the right deck, it will be an overperformer, but other than that, I don't think you're really wanting to go time just for this card. So next up, we have Novice Entomancer. Sorry guys, I'm typing up, like I said, this is the first time I'm seeing all these cards, so I'm typing up my show notes for it as well, so I can go back to it later on and you guys will see it. This is a 3/3 mage at uncommon for 3 and a time. So a lot of splashable cards here, and it has endurance. So 3/3 for 3 with endurance is solid. That's great. I like that. And then shift 5. So you shift 2 additional. You could play a 2/2 Locust with flying. Yeah, this card is solid. I like it quite a bit. The fact that sometimes you're perfectly okay playing it at 3/3 for 3 on curve, and the endurance will be relevant. And then later in the game, you can shift it to sneak in 3 damage as well as get a 2/2 flyer. So yeah, that seems like solid value. You're getting an evasive unit. I like that quite a bit. So we're giving Novice Entomancer a 4. I like cards that are solid throughout the curve, and the fact that it gives you 5/5 worth of stats across 2 bodies for 5 is pretty relevant. Next is Omnivorous Vorlunk. So this card is a little interesting, and I think it's actually doing better than people initially thought. It is kind of like the Lightning Strike or removal spell for time. That being said, it is a 3/1 dinosaur at common. It has killer and overwhelm for 3 time. So you do have to kind of make sure you are in time to play this guy, but you pretty much use it as a removal spell. You play it, you attack something, you kill it, you maybe get a little extra damage over. It does combo really well with Horn of Plenty, which we'll talk about in a little bit when it comes up. I think it's fine. It is completely serviceable, especially if you are not in fire or shadow to have some solid removal. I think Ominous Vorlunk does a decent decent job of filling that role. And sometimes there are some bonuses because it is a unit. It can also kill something if you catch it at a right time, and then or give it quick draw, and then it stays on the board. So I'm gonna give Omnivorous Vorlunk a 3. I think it is a solid curve filler. Once again, not really an overachiever. Next up, we have Patience. This is an uncommon slow spell for 3 at a time, and increase the cost of each card in the enemy hand by 1. I mean, so early in the game, this card is pretty good because you're slowing your opponent down by 1 turn as if they missed their power drop or something like that. But later in the game, you're going to do this when they have plenty of power, so the 1 might not really be relevant, and you might get less cards. So that being said, Patience, yeah, you're getting a 1 from me. I think at best, this is going to be a constructed playable for some control decks or something like that. Not really feeling the Patience. Next up, we have Quicksilver Ooze. This is a 2/2 ooze at common for 3 at a time, and it has Twist 3. Create a Quicksilver Ooze. 3 Twist Quicksilver Ooze to play a 2/2 blob. So yeah, this card is surprisingly good. The fact that it is a 2/2 for 3 is a little bummer sometimes, but you can immediately twist it the next turn to get a 2/2 and a 2/1 on the board. So that is awesome. If you are able to pump its health, once again, like all twist units, you can start machine gunning out 2/2s, which could be relevant in a color that has additional ways to pump all its units. Then you're starting to spit out 3/3 for 3. That is pretty awesome. So I do like Quicksilver Ooze. I don't think it is a straight up bomb, but I do like it above the average curve filler. So I will put Quicksilver Ooze at a 3.5. This card is really good, and with a little bit of help becomes even better. And it can also help chump block in the meantime if you're falling behind. Next up, we have Search Party. This is a slow spell at uncommon for 3 time. It has warp and play 2 1/1 explorers. I think this card is fine. You're a little undercosted on stats. You're paying 3 for 2/2 worth of stats, but it is across 2 bodies, and it does have warp. And once again, this is a somewhat go wide color, and you have a couple of ways of pumping your team. It could chump block. I don't think there are explorer synergies in this format, but I think this card is okay. I personally have not played it. I think I've drafted it once. I ended up not putting it in the deck, but it could go. I mean, once again, if you're in some kind of, let's say, Xenon that has multiple ways to, I think that total gives you 4 different ways to pump your entire team, then having a couple of units off of 1 card is relevant, but nothing to write home about. So I'm giving Search Party a 3. Next up on the list, we have Stillweave Shroud. This is another weapon that kind of mimics some of the things that Time has been doing before. It is a +1/+2 weapon at uncommon for 3 at a time, and summon silence an enemy unit. Yeah, I like this card. I think it's good. Pumping 2 health is quite relevant, like we said, in a world of Twist. Just comboing this off with the ooze lets you create 2 more 2/2s, and you incidentally get to silence a pesky utility unit or flyer or evasive unit that your opponent has, or lifesteal or deadly. Comes in handy. I think this card is solid, so I'm giving Stillweave Shroud a 3. All right, we're back on the units. We have Submerged Titan. Give me a second to write that. All right, Submerged Titan is a 1/1 Sentinel at common for 3 at a time. So once again, easily splashable. It has Shift 4, so you're paying 1 more to give this guy evasion for 3 units, or protection. And when you play another unit, Submerged Titan gets a +1/+1. So obviously when we talk about Search Party, it will trigger this twice. When you twist Ooze, it will trigger this, etc., etc. So there are multiple ways to get several triggers off of this guy. I could easily see a play pattern when you shift it on 4, then play maybe 2 more units, and this guy becomes a 3/3. Hopefully you really want to see him get up to a 4. The community is on the fence about this guy. Some people like him, some people do not. It is close to the Infused Guardian thing, where the longer the game goes, he just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But there is a window where he can easily be taken out. And I don't think you're super high picking this. So I am putting a Submerged Titan at a 3. Of note, it only requires 1 time influence. So it is easily splashable. So it could go in a more aggressive go wide strategy type deck, like Splashing Praxis, where you can play Assembly Line and get 3 units off of 1 card. That guy immediately bumps up to a 4/4, and that's where it outdoes itself. Next up, we have Swirl the Sands. This is a fast spell at uncommon for 3 in a time. A very common cost, apparently, in time this set. Put an enemy relic, curse, or unit with flying on the bottom of its owner's deck. So for all intents and purposes, this is removal, because in limited, rarely do we ever see the bottom of our deck, and there are very, very few ways where cards actually shuffle someone's deck in Eternal. So for all intents and purposes, this is removal. Of note, it is conditional. It does not get away with or do away with beefy units on the ground, but any evasive unit and any weapon that they might have, or some kind of card draw or something relic, it gets rid of. So I think it is quite good. I have not had the chance to play with this card yet, but I feel like you're always going to find a target for it. That being said, because it is somewhat conditional, I don't think I would really like to have more than 1 in the deck, but I do think it will do some work in the time deck. So I'm going to give Swirl the Sands a 4. But once again, just because it cleanly gets rid of the things it can get rid of, and it is somewhat wide, I'm not quite sure how many curses are in this format. I know there are some, so that could be relevant. But yeah, so we're going to give Swirl the Sands a 4, but I could easily see it being one of the cards that I changed my mind to later in the format. All right, guys, next up we have Trickster Mage. This is a 2/3 mage at uncommon for 3 in a time. It says warp cards on top of your deck cost 1 less. Your units cost 1 less to shift. So this card seems pretty good to me. We have quite a bit of warp in time. We have definitely some shift in time as well. And the fact that we're able to do these a little cheaper seems okay to me. The thing that really sets me off for this is the fact that a 2/3 body for 3 is 100% serviceable. You're fine with that. You're not upset. So it's not like the Expedition Leader, I believe, that we were talking about earlier, that's a 1/1 for 3. There you're really undercosted or overcosted. Here you're getting about what's fine with some additional bonus. So I think it goes up in value, definitely if you have more warp and shift. But if not, you're perfectly fine putting your deck. So it's an oak. It's just fine picking it. I'm actually going to give it a 3.5 because I do not think this card is busted. But it will give you some additional bonuses in your deck. You might be able to gain value off of this 2, maybe 3 times, depending, especially if you play it on curve. If you draw it late, it really doesn't do much. But you never know. So yeah, I like Trickster Mage, especially because you're just kind of getting a decent body with some upside. Actually, I'm going to still give it a 3. I don't think it's a card that you're windmill slamming. So we're just going to go ahead and give it a 3. Next up, we have Mute. This is a fast spell at common for 4 in a time and silence 2 enemy units. I do like silence effects, but 4 seems a little expensive, even for the ability to silence 2. Because sometimes I feel like there's going to be chances where you're going to want to silence 1 unit and they're not really going to have a second unit to silence. It is a fast spell, so that comes in handy, but the fact that you have to leave up 4 power is quite a thing for those of you that remember Entrapment. That was a removal spell, and leaving 4 power up for that guy was a liability for sure. So I'm going to give Mute a 2. I don't think I'm going to fault anyone for having 1 in their deck, but you aren't excited to play it either. Next up, granted, there is a lot of twists in this format, so that's kind of relevant. So maybe, you know, and a lot of flyers. So maybe the mute or the silence comes in handy, more handy than it seems on the surface. But for right now, I think there's other more viable silence effects. So, yep, mute, you are getting a 2. Next up, we have Sauropod Crasher. This is a 3/3 dinosaur at common for 4 in a time, and it has warp. So we see a lot of 3/3s for 3. So essentially you're paying 1 additional power for warp here. I think it's fine. This card is serviceable. It does some work. The fact that you could potentially draw it technically for off the top of your deck means that it does do some work and gets you deeper into your deck as well. So I think it's fine. You're going to play these just okay. It is in a semi-awkward spot at 4 just because we are going to talk about another card. Actually, never mind. It's in the curated packs, but there is the 3/4 plated Vorlunk, armored Vorlunk that is 3/4 at 4, which you obviously want that, but I think they can cohesively work in the same deck just because, once again, the warp is something to it is relevant. So I'm giving Sauropod Crasher a 3. I think it's a fine curve filler in your deck. Next up, we have Temporal Adept, or Adept, however you guys want to say it. It is a 2/2 mage at uncommon for 4 time. So that is extremely specific requirements. You're overcosted, 2/2 and double time, so you definitely want to be time. It has warp, and your spells have warp. Yeah, I don't think this is relevant. Like, if you're in the Spells Matter deck, which I've not been able to play or seen play yet, or if there even is one in this format, then they can go up in value, but I'm not even sure if time is the deck that wants it. So you're essentially playing a 2/2 to ramp out maybe 3 of 4 of your spells in your deck, maybe tops in a turn early. I think it's relevant, but not relevant to cover the expensive stats and the steep influence requirement. So I'm giving Temporal Adept a 2. That being said, if there is some kind of Spells Matter deck, I can see this being a little higher on the pick order. So here is another one that is getting a ton of hype, which I think is on the surface pretty easy to evaluate. We have Corrupted Behemoth. This is a 4/6 dinosaur at common for 5 in a time. Once again, easily splashable, and 4/6 for 5 is solid stats. We see that quite often in time, and it does work. This guy has Overwhelm, which is nice. We always like to see a big unit with Overwhelm, so it can't be chump blocked. And it has Pay 3 and Twist Corrupted Behemoth. So 3 is probably about the highest I feel comfortable going for a twist. Just because 4 and 5 seem like they take up your whole turn. 3 doesn't seem horrible, even though it is getting up there, to gain 2 health. So this guy, immediately you can twist it once to make it a 5/5 Overwhelm for 5, which is awesome, and you gain 2 health. And you can make this guy you can make this guy a 9/1 and gain 10 health. That's just ridiculous. This card is awesome. It stabilizes you in multiple ways. It helps you race. It is just a phenomenal card through and through. Really a solid payoff for going time. So I'm going to give Corrupted Behemoth a 4. Yeah, this card just does a lot of work. You're happy to have multiples of it in your deck. So this card is a bit of a controversy because you don't like it is a top fine finisher, but some people don't know if your deck is fast if you want it, or if it's slow if it even matters, because you guys are already big. But my verdict is still not out on this card. So I'm gonna give it a 3 right off the bat. It is Horn of Plenty. This is your units have a +1/+1. Oh, I'm sorry. It is in a common relic, so you see quite a bit of this for 5 in a time. So it's easily splashable, easily to play on turn 5. And all your units get +1/+1 indefinitely for as long as Horn of Plenty is in play. So I've seen this break some stalls. I've seen this help aggro power through extra damage. Yeah, it is definitely something to play around. I don't know if it is a signal if you see one of these going late or not. I'm starting to see them go later and later in the drafts, so they might not be picked as high as they were initially. So So like I said, I'm going to give it a 3. My verdict is still not out on how strong this card is. This ability typically has been strong. And at 5 is kind of okay because it means you can still follow up your curve as 2, 3, 4 and then play this. Versus sometimes this is a turn 3 or turn 4 play and then it kind of hiccups your curve. And then late game, if you have a board, it does some work still. Okay, so here is the one of the time cycle for this one that I was telling you about, where you shift them and they essentially do something to another unit while they are shifted. So Venomous Mount is a 4/3 Scorpion at uncommon for 5 time, so kind of steep, but it has deadly. And shift 3, give one of your other units deadly until Venomous Mount emerges. So I like this card a lot. Reason being is it is okay statted for the cost, even though it is competing with some hard things at 5. But you can shift this at 3 on maybe your 1-drop or 2-drop, or later in the game you can shift it, make one of your less relevant units deadly so they can trade up or at least hold down the board. And then when this guy comes to play or emerges, he can get in for 4 and then either continue attacking because he's a solid body, or just stay back on defense. So I like Venomous Mount. I gave it a 4. I think you are happy to play it in any time deck. That being said, the double time definitely means you want to be in primarily time. Next up, we have Refreshing Waters. Ooh, there we go. Thank you. It is a fast spell at uncommon for 6 time. It has warp, and you gain 2 life for each of your units. Yeah, I don't like just plain old life gain cards. You know, best case scenario in a stalled board state, this card gains you 10 life. Well, you can do that off of Behemoth, and that brings a body with it. So yeah, I don't like it even with the warp. I'm giving Refreshing Water a 1 because it just doesn't affect the board state. It could help you potentially if you are in a very tight racing situation, but that is it. It doesn't really help you win. It doesn't make your opponent any further away from winning. It just kind of slows them down. I don't like it. So next up, we're towards the end of our time here. We have, pun intended, we have Tremor Shocker. This is a 6/6 worm at common for 6 time. So just your standard beefy unit, big fatty to drop on the board, but it has shift 4. And I think that is more relevant than it seems. You can always play this on turn 6, and a 6/6 for 6 is just fine. Does some serious work. It can even block the behemoths that we talked about earlier. But the fact that you can shift it on 4 if you have nothing better to do, or you can shift it late game so you can just swing 6 to face, is extremely relevant. That could really change math, throw you ahead, throw your opponent behind, and it just does more work than you think because of the emerge ability giving it unblockable. That being said, though, it is competing for stuff, and on the surface it is just a big beater. So I'm giving Tremor Shocker a 3. I think you'll be able to get more than enough of these for your deck should you want them. And our final time unit, and let me say, this card is a doozy. I have not had the luxury of playing with it, but I have played against it. This is Blurred Stygy Moloch. Yeah. Stygy Moloch, sure. It is a 7/6 dinosaur at uncommon for 10 and a time. That's right, 10. So that's extremely expensive. Most likely never going to hit that in a limited format. But let's read the text box. It has Overwhelm, and it says a Blurred Stygy costs 7 less, so it costs 3 if you have 7 attack or more among your units on the board. Yeah, that is surprisingly easy to come by. A 4/4, a 3/4, do it. A couple of 2/2s and a 3/3, do it. Or 3/1. Yeah, it is surprisingly easy to play this with 3 power. It might be turn 3, might be turn 4, might be turn 5, but you're still just paying 3 for a 7/6 Overwhelm. This card is a beat stick. I absolutely think it's amazing. It helps stabilize you. It gets in there for some serious damage. I like this card quite a lot. So yeah, I'm gonna give it Man, I'm kind of on the fence about giving it a 4, a 4 point, or a 5, but I think at the end of the day, it's still just a big unit, even if you could get out early. So I think I'm just gonna give it a 4.5. It's really good. Like, you want to windmill slam these when you see these. They're so good. But all right, guys, that's gonna do it for time. So let's move on to our next faction. All right, guys, next up is Justice on the roster. That's right. And the first card we're going to be talking about, give me a second, update my list once again, is Flash Grenade. And this card is deceptively influential. So Flash Grenade is a fast spell at common for 1 and a Justice. That's right. It is very easy to leave up. No finest hour it is not, but enemy units and relic weapons get a -2 attack this turn. Yeah, this card is surprisingly good. It changes combat math quite a bit, especially the wider the board gets. If someone's trying to go wide and they think the trade-offs are even or slightly in their favor, you play this. All of a sudden they lose their relic weapon. It doesn't kill their unit. A lot of things that they thought they were going to trade with doesn't. Yeah, this card is great on offense, great on defense. It's a really solid card, surprisingly. And the fact that I think part of its value is that it is very easy to leave up. It doesn't cost you very much. So yeah, that being said, it does not remove units on its own. You do need a little bit of help, but it is quite impactful. Once you guys get 1 or 2 blowouts with it on both ends, you understand its value. So I'm actually giving it a 3. I think it is a solid addition to any deck, and you're okay having more than 1 in it, actually. Moving right along, we have Headhunter. This is a 2/1 Gunslinger Minotaur at uncommon for 1 and a green. So 2/1 for 1, great, that's fine, perfectly serviceable. Then we have pay 2 and twist Headhunter to play a wanted poster on an enemy unit. I think this card is good. I am giving it a 3 because it's still a 2/1, but the fact that it could be a 2/1 early, get in there for some damage, and then when it's kind of played out its usefulness, you can sacrifice it to put a wanted poster on something that you may end up trading off with and drawing 2 cards. So yeah, I like Headhunter. It is a 3 because at the end of the day, it's still just a 2/1. It is not a backbreaking card, but it does have utility anywhere in the curve. Obviously, if you draw it later in the game, you could just use it for the wanted poster effect. I don't think you really want to pump its health to put up multiple wanted posters, but I wouldn't hold it against you if you did. Next up, we have Heist. This is a slow spell at common for 1 and a Justice. It has Warp and give a unit or weapon in your hand a +1/+1. So yeah, I had 2 of these, or actually 1 of these in my first draft deck, and I used it because I had 3 Bright Mace Paladin. So giving it a +1/+1, making a 4/4 for 3 with lifesteal was relevant. But yeah, this card it's not worth a card, especially when you have essentially a coin that could do it for free and it doesn't take up a card in your deck. Yeah, Heist is yeah, it's just not impactful enough. And then there could be a time where a unit's not going to be in your hand, or relics, so the warp may not come into play. So yeah, at the end of the day, Heist gets a 1 for me. Don't really think you want to be playing this in your deck. If you need to put it in for some extra playables, that is fine, but you really don't want to. All right, it just isn't worth a card in the long run. Like I said, I did it to try it out in the first time I played, and I kind of regretted it. Like, it did a little bit of work, but not much. And it was literally just with 1 other card. Spending a card so another unit can twist 1 time seems okay, but not great. All right, next up we have Warfront Missionary. This is a 1/3 cleric at common for 1 and a green. And surprisingly, this card is actually better than it seems. Once again, the 1/3 body helps you block quite a few things in this format, and it trades with twist units. And the fact that it's a 1/3 means it can attack early on to get onslaught. A lot of times your opponent either just feints you having the trick or is okay taking 1. So it triggers onslaught just fine. So yeah, Warfront Missionary is actually better than you would think. Typically we put this at maybe a 2 unless you really need it, especially with things like the 1/4 Gruon running around, but it does some work in this format. So Warfront Missionary, you get a 3. I think it is a fine card. All right, next up we have a piece of removal, which is Isolate. Isolate is a fast spell at uncommon for 2 and a green, and it says kill an enemy unit that is attacking alone. So I am still trying to figure out where I'm at with this card. It does kill absolutely anything. It just has to be attacking alone. This goes well against emerge units, because typically if you have a stalled board state, only the emerge unit is going to attack, so you can take that out, or a pesky flyer. So it does take out units that do matter, because typically if they're the only unit that is able to attack, there's a reason for it. But there are some times where your opponent is just the aggressor and they're going to attack with multiple units at a time, and it just sits there dead in your hand. So I'm still not sure how much it lines up. I've only been able to play it 1 time. So I'm going to give it a 3.5, because I could see it going either way. I could see the emerge and evasion type things being legitimate and getting rid of this, or I could see it where very rarely is only one unit attacking, and then it just sits in your hand half the time, and you just kind of treat it like a fall short and kill whatever you can as soon as you can. So I'm gonna give Isolate a 3.5, and we'll leave it open to judgment whenever we come back to it. Next up we have Pioneering Aviator. This is a 2/2 tinker at uncommon for 2 and a justice. When you play a spell, you gain 1 armor, flying while you have armor. So this card typically has flying about a little over half the time. If you, let's just say half the time. You have to really be in a deck that creates armor multiple ways. Now there are a couple of uncommons and commons that do create armor, like the pilot we're going to talk about here soon. The thing is though, on the surface is just a 2/2 for 2, which is absolutely serviceable, and then sometimes you get the added bonus of it having evasion. So I do think Pioneer Aviator is just fine in your deck. Never bad to have a 2/2 for 2 with some upside. And obviously later in the game you have a higher chance of keeping armor, so it has a better chance of having flying. So Pioneer Aviator gets a 3 from me. Next up we have Relentless Deadshot. This card has done some work on both sides of the board for me. This is a 2/2 gunslinger at uncommon for 2 and a justice, lifesteal, and pay 3 to twist Relentless Gunshot to stun an enemy unit. So 2/2 for 2 with lifesteal, that's awesome. That being said though, pump effects on it work well. Definitely changes math, combat math, and things like that, and a race. But the fact that you're able to pay 3 and stun a unit, or can pay 6 in a turn and stun 2 units, is quite relevant. It is in a color that can pump easily, and so adding more health to this guy means you can stun even more things, increase its attack with lifesteal, so you're dealing damage and gaining life. Yeah, this card is great. It kind of does it all. Just for a 2-drop, it's extremely versatile. You're okay drawing it early, you're okay drawing it late. I like Relentless Deadshot quite a bit, and it pretty much goes in every deck that can play it. So I'm going to give it a 4. It might be a little of aggressive of a scoring for it. It might be closer to a 3, but yeah, I like it. I think it's great. It has a lot of utility. Moving right along, we have Reweave. This is a slow spell at uncommon for 2 and a justice. Sacrifice a unit to play a unit from your deck with the same cost or less and shift it. Yeah, I think this is just a constructed playable. Like, if you have a bomb card, it can potentially quote unquote double as that card, but then you have to have a unit with the same kind of power, which things like Kimmy or some of your cheaper units, it might be more relevant, but your more expensive ones, not really. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this card. I'm going to give it a 1. That's all. I'm sure some decks will find some sneaky ways of making it work, but whatever. Let's move on. Next up, we have Silver Short Sword. This is a +1/+3 relic weapon at uncommon for 2 justice. Entomb, you gain 3 armor. So essentially it gives you 3 armor total. 3 when you play it, and then whenever it goes away, you get additional 3. I have no idea where to put this weapon on, honestly, but because I've never played it. And the reason why I've never played it, it's weird because it's uncommon. So I feel like the developers put it uncommon for a reason. But yeah, I guess you can use it initially, and then when it breaks, you can pump up the next, have extra armor for the next relic weapon. I'm not really sure, but there's 2 different weapons in Justice alone that are better. They're both 3-3 and 3-4. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 2, just because, like, I guess you could play it for the armor matters synergy, and it would pick off like 1 or 2 low end units. But yeah, not really feeling it. Next up, we have Steadfast Paladin. This card is pretty good. I like it. It is a 2/1 Paladin at common for 2 Justice. Invulnerable to damage on your turn. Yeah, this card is great. You're just able to bash in, triggering Onslaught without any issues. And if you're able to give this thing deadly or pump it up or something, you just continue attacking relentlessly without any worry of it dying unless your opponent tries to do something on their turn to kill it. Yeah, this card is awesome. It is a great 2-drop. You're happy to play it. I like it quite a bit. I'm going to give Steadfast Paladin a 3. Reason being is it's still a 2/1 at the end of the day until you do something else with it. This card is another deceptively good card for some reason, and I think it's just because I like aggressive decks. It could essentially change based on what's going on, but it is Svetya's Faithful. This is a common soldier at 2 and a Justice. It has Warp and Onslaught +2/+2. Yeah, I find it quite easy to make this card a 3/3, and warping it in on turn 2 or 3 to have a 3/3 just seems like you're totally doing it. It just does so much work. Not really sure why it feels that way. At the end of the day, it's just a 3/3 for 2 with a little bit of work to get there, but maybe the warp is relevant. So yeah, I'm giving Svetya's Faithful a 3/3. I like this card. I think it does more work than it seems like on the surface. Granted, occasionally you will play it as a 1/1 for 2, which you aren't happy about, but that is sometimes high risk, high reward. Next up on the chopping block, we have Touch of Grace. This is a fast spell at uncommon for 2 and a Justice. It has Warp and give one of your units invulnerable to damage this turn. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1.5. Once again, invulnerable is relevant though. I mean, that you can save one of your big units. Typically that's probably where you want to play it, or on one of your units with deadly or something like that. Something that could potentially win combat or is worth using a card to save. That being said though, the fact that it just gives invulnerable means that it's just saving your unit. You might not be able to kill whatever you're going up against. It might be like they pump their guy larger than yours, so this just saves your guy and it negates. It's a 1-for-1 their combat trick for yours. So it does have Warp, and it also prevents direct damage spells like Char and Streets of Flame. But yeah, I'm not very high on it. I had a chance to take it, I just never played it. So I gave Touch of Grace a 1.5 because maybe it's better than it seems, but I just haven't experienced it being a blowout yet. Next up, we have Auric Lookout. This is a Minotaur at common 2/3 for 3 and a Justice. It has Endurance, which is great, completely serviceable. Summon Scout, that is a nice bonus. I like that quite a bit. And then Shift 2. So sometimes you can play this on turn 2 to get in some extra damage and scout a little early, clean up your draws. Yeah, this card's great. I think it's fine. Fits your curve quite well in multiple slots. And if you draw it late, you at least get the scout effect. If you're able to pump it, the endurance comes into play a little more often. It's a good onslaught enabler. Yeah, this card is solid all around. So I like Auric Lookout, and I'm giving it a 3. And it really helps stonewall or at least slow down the momentum of your more aggressive decks. Next up, we have Inner Might. This is a fast spell at uncommon, and it's for 3 time, and give one of your units +1/+1 this turn, plus an additional +1/+1 for each other spell in your void. Yeah, so this kind of goes off to the the Spells Matters deck, which I have not seen yet. So I'm going to give it 2. I think more often than not, it's going to be at best a +2/+2 for 3, which doesn't seem great, especially with stuff like Daring Maneuver running around in the format. So I could be wrong. This card could be a blowout if I come up against that deck, but yeah, I'm off of it. So I'm going to give Inner Might a 2. I think you're not really incentivized to play this card in your deck, but if you do, it's not like, oh my god, what are you doing? Next up on the list, we have Chemo's Blueprint. This is a slow spell at uncommon for 3 Justice. Draw a weapon of your choice from your deck. Onslaught, it gets a +1/+1. Yeah, I think this thing could do some work. I think it's fine. Playing on 3, going to get any old weapon, like typically you're going to have the Mithril Mace, so then it becomes a 4/5 weapon. That seems pretty darn good. It tutors for it, so it's better late game than it is early. Don't think you really want to be spending your turn 3 doing this, because it is kind of do nothing. But it does do some work, so yeah, I'm fine taking 1. I wouldn't fault you for it. So, especially if you end up, I don't know if there's any rare or legendary weapons in this format. I gotta double check next week when we do the, or actually later in the week because I'm a little behind, do the legendary and rare set review. But yeah, I think this card is fine. I don't think you're super excited windmill slamming it. Yeah, you got there, but it could do some work in the right decks. Followed up is a Kasul Blade Barrier. Sorry, Blade Barrier. I'm like reading and typing at the same time, so I apologize. Hopefully the clicks aren't that loud. This is a 2/2 warrior at common for 3 and a justice, and it gets a +3/+3 while you have armor, so it becomes a 5/5. I've seen this card do some work, and I've seen this card do nothing. It is very dependent on whether you, how many ways you can create armor for yourself and how many ways you are able to defend it. Because sometimes you can play that 2/1 flyer on turn 2 that gives you 2 armor, and then play this guy on turn 3 and he's a 3 or a 5/5. But then if they have like any kind of way to get rid of that armor, that goes back to being a 2/2. So I think it's a little too relevant for my taste. I have seen it do some work. If it can stick as a 5/5, like it can definitely do some work, especially coming down on turn 3. And then like playing out on turn 3 and then turn 4 giving yourself some armor, that is relevant. But once again, a lot of times I've seen this mainly as a 2/2 or just cut it from the deck. So I'm giving Kasul Blade Bearer a 2. Alright, here's another front runner of the format, and I like this card immediately as soon as I read it the first time. This is Retribution. Retribution is awesome. It is a slow spell at common for 3 and a justice, so easily splashable. It says silence and stun an enemy unit. So on the surface, it is rebuke for 1 extra, so that's not exciting. But onslaught, then kill it. That's right. This is unconditional removal at 3 power, and believe it or not, it is surprisingly easy to trigger onslaught in one form or fashion or another, considering you know, faking combat tricks or evasive units or small units that they just don't care about taking 1 damage. I think this card is great. The fact that on the baseline level it is still rebuke is awesome, because it can somewhat deal with annoying units in some form or fashion, sometimes completely with the silence effect, sometimes just temporarily with the stun, but then just it 90% of the time is just a straight up kill spell for anything. I like it, so I'm going to be as bold as to give Retribution a 5. It's 1 justice, so it's easily splashable. It gets even better in the late game. Yeah, I think it's just great. I really do. I think it's awesome. It might be a little ambitious of me. It might be closer to a 4, but yeah, it's just awesome. And at 3 no less, so it makes it very easy to play another spell and it in the same turn as well, which is quite relevant. And remember, you can also attack with your relic weapons to trigger onslaught. So yeah. Moving along, we have Spell Strike Sorceress. This is a 1/1 mage at common for 3 and a justice, and it has shift 2 to no effect. And when you play a spell, Spell Strike Sorceress gets a +1/+1. So here's another Spells Matters payoff. That being said, I do like this card just on the norm. I'm not taking it highly, but the fact that you can shift it on 2, then use, if you're aggressive Recano deck or something, you can use a couple of combat tricks, very easily get this guy up to like a 4-4 or something like that. The longer the game goes, the better it gets, obviously. But I wouldn't pick it too highly. I don't think you're getting there. But I do feel there is some kind of spells matters deck, and a card we'll be talking about in a couple more will emphasize that fact more so. I just haven't seen the deck yet. Maybe I'll try to draft it soon here so I can give you guys a better estimate when we come back and get our first impressions. So I'm giving Spell Strike Sorceress a 3. Really would like for it to have something else on it. Wait, let me double check, make sure it didn't. Yeah, okay. There's one that does lifesteal. I just want to make sure it wasn't that one. All right, War Wagon is solid. I like this card quite a bit. It is a 3/3 engine at uncommon for 3 Justice, and it has Shift 5. Give one of your other units a +3/+3 until War Wagon emerges. Yeah, I like this card. I'm going to give it a 4 because I like its versatility. If you need to, you could just play it 3/3 for 3. It's just fine. You draw it later in the game. You could plus one of your evasive units. You could plus a twist unit. You can do all kinds of things to really capitalize on the additional 3/3 +3/+3 stats you're getting with charge on something else. I've seen this card do some serious work. You're always happy to draw it anywhere in any point in the game. So, yep. War Wagon gets a 4 from me. I think it is a obvious reason to be in Justice. Moving along, we have High Alert. This is a solid combat trick. It is a fast spell at common for an Justice. It has Warp, which comes in handy. That is actually one of the appeals of this card. And then ready one of your units. So if it's exhausted, you can now block with it, or aka ready it. And it gets a +3/+3 and endurance this turn. So this card is good. I like it. It does a lot of work. It helps you trade up. It has the same power as Finest Hour, but obviously you are same stats, but you're gaining endurance, which, I mean, it helps on offense is why. So it readies one of your units, so it makes it good on defense, and then it gives your units endurance for the turn, which helps on offense. That being said, +4/+4 is tough to leave up on defense. But sometimes you can get away with it being a combat trick. It's a little harder to play around than Entrapment was. So yeah, I like it. I like High Alert. I gave it a 3. I think it is easily telegraphed, but it does do some work regardless. All right, here's another one of those spells matters payoffs. This is Kosul Curator, which is a 4/4 mage at common for 4 and a Justice. So 4/4 for 4. Great. That's awesome. 4/4 for 4 is really good stats, believe it or not. Kosul Curator can't attack unless you have played a spell this turn. Yeah. That makes it a little bit tougher of a card, but I will say this. I have played one in my decks even without that many spells, because a lot of the times, if you have an open 4 slot, a 4/4 that just sits there and blocks really shuts down your opponent's offense, and sometimes forces them to use a combat trick on a unit that you were probably not going to attack with anyways. And whenever you can, sure, just trigger and send it into the red zone. They either kill it or they don't. So I do like Kosul Curator. The downside is a thing for sure, but it sometimes isn't as much of a downside as you expect. So I gave it a 3. Next we have Reclaim. This is a slow spell at uncommon for 4 and a Justice. Draw 2 Justice Sigils from your deck. Onslaught trigger, play them instead. So yeah, I think this card is a little bit better than it seems. I have not been able to play with it yet. I am just going to give it a 3 rating because it does not necessarily affect a board this turn, and it is 4, which is quite expensive. But the fact that it guarantees that you hit your power plays 5 and 6 is extremely good, and the fact that sometimes it will just ramp you 2 power ahead is absolutely backbreaking. You're able to just cast everything in your deck essentially way ahead on curve on your opponent, and sometimes they could just win you the game off of that. Granted, you do have to have those things in your hand. You could always be the first to play 2 spells in 1 turn as well. So I like this card, but I'm not over the moon on it. I am giving it a 3, leaving it open to further testing whenever I get the chance. Now, this next card, on the other hand, I have had a chance to play to include in my first draft and a couple following, and I like this card a lot. This is Torrid Test Pilot. This is a 1/4 Minotaur Valkyrie for 4 and a Justice, so easily splashable if need be, and has flying. So 1/4 flyer is great for 4. It blocks everything under the sun. Then pay 2 and twist Torrid Test Pilot to gain 1 armor. So this is great. This card is great. It gains you a little bit of life, so it helps you in race situations. It gains you armor, which we've already established is a thing that matters in Justice. And the twist cost is only 2, which is significantly, it's relative cheap. And the fact that it already has invasion means twisting it aggressively is okay, because this thing could be a 2/3 and block and trade with units in the air, or you can upgrade it all the way to a 4/1 flyer and just get in there for a ton of damage and your opponent has to answer it. The versatility of this card is absolutely amazing. It's a great combo with the armor gain on the twist and having evasion with flying. So yeah, that card is great. I like Torrid Test Pilot a lot. I give it a 3.5. Moving right along, we have Roosting Warhawk. Roosting Warhawk is a 3/2 bird at common for 5 and a Justice, and it has flying, obviously. So baseline, kind of medium, not too stoked about it. But if you have triggered Onslaught, it gets a +1/+1, so it becomes a 4/3 flyer for 5, which is way more relevant, reaching that Mantisaur stat range. I think this card is good. It seems to match pretty well in the format. There are plenty of things to deal 3 damage to kill it, but it is a 4 power flyer, so that is relevant. And if it's on curve, once again, Onslaught seems to be easy to trigger, so I like it. I'm giving Roosting Warhawk a 3. Of note, it is 5, so you don't want too many of them. Next up, we have Shield Crafter. This is a 2/6 Tinker at uncommon for 5 and a Justice, so it's competing with the Roosting Warhawk, and it has Onslaught. You gain 6 armor. That is a ton of armor. This guy is a 2/6, so it blocks absolutely everything on the ground except maybe a Twisted Behemoth or the Tremor Shocker, and gaining 6 armor is awesome. It's super awesome if you have a relic weapon. It could just get in there and get 2-3 units off the board if it's big enough, or just gaining 6 armor period is a huge life swing and can really throw off combat math. I like this card a lot. I do think it kind of can pull you. It is easily splashable as well, so I think I'm going to give it another 3.5. It does a really good job of stabilizing you when you're behind. It doesn't really break parity, doesn't really get you ahead aggressive wise, so I am just going to give it 3.5 because I think it is a solid pick, but it doesn't change your board state. Now this next card, yeah, this card's a doozy. I have not been able to play with it yet, but boy do I want to. This card is Steel Legion. This is a 4/4 Valkyrie at uncommon for 5 Justice. It has flying and endurance. Yeah, for those of you that play Magic the Gathering, this is Eternal's version of Sarah Angel. This card is busted. 4/4 flyer for 5 is phenomenal stats. That is huge. It has evasion, and the fact that it has endurance means it can get in there relentlessly and still block. If you have combat tricks to keep this thing alive, it's just awesome. I think this card is super powerful. Definitely want to take it if you see it. So I gave Steel Legion a 4. All right, next up we have one of the relic weapons I was talking about. This is the one for this set. Obviously the Mithril Mace is in the curated packs. This is Twin Sai. Twin Sai is a +3/+3 relic weapon at common for 5 Justice, and it has warp. Yeah, this card does some work. There are plenty of units with 3 toughness in here, or 3 health, that this guy kills. And the fact that it has 3 armor itself means that sometimes you'll be able to kill 2 smaller units. And it's always a plus when you get 2 for 1. And the warp does come into play every once in a while. So I like Twin Sai. I gave it a 3. This card I don't think I've seen. Let me read it to remind myself. This is Unseen Ghostblade. This is a +4/+4 relic weapon at uncommon for 6 and a justice. It has Onslaught. Play an Emerald Incarnation with power or health and attack equal to the number of spells in your void. So this is a spells matters payoff as well. Granted, I feel like I'd be okay with just 2 spells in the void and triggering this, because I mean, you get a 4/4 weapon that's going to kill one of their bigger units or 2, and it immediately produces its own blocker. You can get a 2/2 or 3/3 for this. I think you're way ahead of the curve, getting 7/7 or 6/6 worth of stats for 6 that can attack. I think this card is solid. I like it quite a bit. We've seen 3/3 weapons at 6, so the fact that we're getting 4/4 with upside is nice. I like Unseen Ghostblade. It's easily splashable, being 6 power and 1 justice. So yeah, I gave Unseen Ghostblade a 4. And the final justice card we have is Valkyrie Accuser. Valkyrie Accuser is a 3/5 Valkyrie at uncommon for 7 justice. So that seems a little under the stat line, right? Even as a flyer, 3/5 is good, but I mean, man, that's still. So let's see what else it does. It has flying and it has Aegis. So I like the fact that it has Aegis. This protects itself. And a 3/5 already is hard to kill. And then having Aegis makes it extremely hard to kill. But then Onslaught, play Timidity on an enemy unit. The cursed unit can't attack is what Timidity does. Yeah, this card seems really good. It takes out one of your opponent's best attackers. And then you're able to get in there with this guy, or at least defend another one. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I've drafted it twice, but I have not been able to play it yet. The 7 cost does make it a bit of a liability, so I am going to give Valkyrie Accuser a 3.5. I think this card is good, but like I said, this format seems to be aggressive, so you're just not getting the 7 very often. And then sometimes you're too far behind. But like I said, that Timidity and it being a 5 health unit can definitely come into play. All right, guys, that's going to do it for green or justice. It seems really powerful, really deep of a color. Good removal, some life gain, some solid units. I think this is going to be one of the best colors of the format. Alrighty then. Our next color is Primal. We are going to start off with Dinomancy Enthusiast. This is a 1/1 Dinosaur Explorer at uncommon for 1 primal. Pay 3 and twist Dinomancy Enthusiast to transform another unit into a 4/2 dinosaur with Reckless. Yeah. So if you guys remember Mass Entomancy from the last format, just giving your opponent a 1/1 flyer was still quite relevant. So a 4/2 is not really a downgrade in some cases. I mean, obviously it will be for a bomb, and you could potentially upgrade one of your units, but it's costing you a unit to do that. Yeah, I don't think this card is any good. Even if you are able to, you're not making 5/5 dinosaurs either. So if you waste a card to give this guy extra health so you can turn more of your units into 4/2 dinosaurs, like, yeah, no, I'm off of it. Dinomancy Enthusiast gets a 1 from me. I don't think you want to be playing this in your deck any which what way, but hey, what do I know, right? Moving on, we are going up against Fend Off. This is a common. Oops, sorry, give me 1 second, guys. I apologize. Need to make sure OBS is up, see what you guys are seeing. There we go. All right, Fend Off is a fast spell at common for 1 primal. Stun an enemy unit and scout. Yeah, this card seems fine. It's not amazing. I think it's just very medium. In an aggressive deck, it will do some work. Scout, there obviously are scout matters synergies that we saw as well, but I don't know. It's just kind of tough to say this is worth a card, because at the end of the day, the unit is still going to come back. It doesn't, silencing sometimes negates the unit, but just stunning it, unless you're really taking advantage of the aggression. Scout does help you dig deeper for an answer, but yeah, I think Fend Off is a 2. Moving right along, we have Furnish. This is a fast spell at common for, once again, 1 and a primal. Give a unit +1 health, or Onslaught, give it +3 health instead. So yeah, this is another way of adding health to one of your twist units, and essentially kind of getting a couple extra twist activations out of them. If you do have maybe somewhere between 4 to 6 twist units, this card probably goes up in value. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it at a 2.5 because it does also help you win combat as well. It is no parry, if you guys remember that from the last format, but I mean, it will do some work. All right, next up we have Good Idea at the Time, which is kind of humorous, but it is a slow spell at uncommon for 1 and a primal. It has warp and transform a card in your hand into a random card. Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna give it a 1. I don't like random effects like this. I really don't. I like to know exactly what I'm getting out of cards. It does give you the high roll option where you could pull out of nowhere a bomb and steal a game, and then sometimes it could just be stone cold nothing and then everything in between. I'm not really sure where the community is at on this. I have seen some people play it. I'm sure it will do some work, so it's probably closer to a 2, but I'm gonna avoid playing this card if I can help it, because I mean, yeah, I don't like the random rollness of it. You know, I guess best case scenario, you're looking at upgrading a sigil that you don't need, or a 1/1 or something, but at the end of the day, I would rather just guarantee I have a random unit that can chump block or something. So yeah. All right, next up we have Gust Rider. This is a 1/1 shaman at uncommon for 1 and a primal. It has flying, so we have another easy enabler, but this card is quite powerful in the fact that it has onslaught, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. That's right. So for those of you that once again play Magic, this is a shout out to Faithless Looting. This is a very good card selection. You are it in of itself can trigger onslaught, and then the fact that it's just great because it allows you to dig 2 cards deeper into your deck. So it's fine early in the game to help you hit the power drops, and it's great late in the game to help you pitch those extra sigils for gas. And it also leaves back an evasive unit as well, so you're not really necessarily going down a card. The Magic version of it is a spell, so it goes away, so you are down a card on the transaction, versus here you're still keeping a body. I like Gust Rider. That being said, I think it's probably about a 3.5, just because the body that it is leaving back is not great, but it's good at every point in the curve, so that has to count for something. I do think it is above an average curve filler, so I give Gust Rider a 3.5. Moving on to the next card on the list, we have Swift Refusal. This is a fast spell at uncommon for 1 and a primal, and negate an enemy spell that isn't fast. Yeah, I'm not really sure where this card is at. It is situational, but I do think it will do some things. I mean, of note, Retribution is slow, Eviscerate is slow. Those are both premium removal spells in the format, so that is a thing. And it's pretty easy to leave 1 up. So sure, I'll give Swift Refusal a 2. I didn't give it a 3 because it is a reactive spell. So sometimes it could just sit in your hand for quite a long time before something happens. Next up, we have Warning Jolt. This is a fast spell at uncommon for 1 and a primal, and deal 1 damage to each attacking enemy. Yeah, I don't think it's a thing. I really don't. I think even though there is going to be a lot of 1 toughness, I'll give it a 2. I'll give it a 2 because twist is a mechanic, and I don't really see a lot of 1 drops, but I mean, we do, but yeah, I think this card might occasionally pick off 1 or 2 things, or maybe kind of help you trade up in combat. Essentially, if you have a bunch of low attack, high health units, this can kind of help get you there. Don't know if you want to spend a card on it, so I'm gonna give it a 2 because I don't think it's completely unplayable, but yeah. Next up, we have Yeti Bully, and I think this is Primal's kind of way of dealing with, or somewhat answering, some occasional twisted units, which is a 1/1 Yeti for 1 and a primal, and it has killer. So we've seen this before. and it has done some work, primarily on a 2-1. But I mean, maybe the 1-1. That being said, I don't think this thing's very high either. I'm gonna give it a 2. There's just so very few things the killer's gonna come relevant, and you really want to pair it with another color that could potentially pump it, which would work for Skycrag or something like that. But yeah, I mean, any card that requires another card to be decent is just not that good for me. So I'm gonna give Yeti Bully a 2. Next up though, this card is not a flop, is Avalanche Yeti. That's right. This is a 2/2 Yeti at uncommon for 2 and a blue. And so right there, just fine. Does work, right? Fits the curve. But then it has shift 6. So late in the game, it will stun 2 enemy units. And they stay stunned until Avalanche Yeti emerges. So this stuns them for effectively 2 extra turns. Or I guess we'll stun them on their turn. So 1 extra turn than a normal stun effect. So this card is absolutely awesome. I like it quite a bit. It can help you when you're behind. It can help you get ahead, and it can break parity. So I like Avalanche Yeti. I gave it a 4. I think it is a solid reason to be in Primal, or the fact that you can at least splash it as well, especially in the late game. Next up, we have Belligerent Yeti. This guy is a 2/1 Yeti at common for 2 and a blue. And it has twist. Pay 1 and twist Belligerent Yeti to deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. I think this card is deceptively good because yes, it is a 2/1, and eventually you could just sack it to ping your opponent or something. But if you're able to pump it in any form or fashion, maybe using that furnish earlier, you're able to lightning or streets of flame something, you know, exactly the same. Like, and you could spread it out however you want. So you could take out a 2 and a 1. You can do 3 to 1. Like, there's plenty of ways where this guy can kind of get some reach in there that kind of puts him slightly above your average 2/1. So I am going to give Belligerent Yeti a 3 because I think the upside kind of pays off quite well. Next up, we have Fledgling Owlet. This is a 1/1 owl at common for 2 and a primal. It has flying, it has warp. Yeah, I'm going to give this guy a 2. And the reason being is that we've seen a lot of flyers at 1 and 2 that essentially do more than this guy. I just don't think, I mean, Huro's flyers is a thing, but it's just... At 1/1 is just not what you want to be doing, and I don't think there's enough flying synergies to make this guy really high. So I mean, it's fine if you play it, but I don't think you're looking to play it. I think you can do a lot better things with your 2-drop. So Fledgling Owlet gets a 2 from me. Next up, we have Fragility. This is a curse that is at common, 2 and a blue. And when the curse unit takes damage, kill it. I have drafted this card a couple times and have not played it, though I do see it being a thing because it allows all your units, or maybe things like Char if you're Skycrag, and maybe your red coin to ping something and kill it. So you are taking occasionally essentially 2 cards to do it, but it is a form of removal. It does get rid of absolutely anything, you know, so you could slap this on a 6/6 block with a 1/1 or a 1/3 and then they both die. But once again, you're using a card to do it, so I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm gonna give it a 2. I feel like you can find better removal there, and you know, they can always just not block if it's, or not attack with it if it's unit to the unit. It, you know, yeah, it just, I don't know. I see too many ways of it being, it is removable, but it's a little too conditional. Your opponent sees it coming a mile away. I guess the best combo you could do is play this, and then, like I said, if you're in Skycrag, use like a Char or a the ping off of the where was it, the Belligerent Yeti to get it or something like that. Yeah, I just, nah, whatever. You're working too hard. 2 it goes. Next up, we have Read the Runes. This is a fast spell at uncommon, and it's for 2 blue. Negate an enemy spell with cost 4 or more, draw a card. So I think this card actually is good because of the fact that typically the cards you are going to want to negate are removal spells and things like that, and just bigger impact spells, which 4 and higher do make the cut. That being said, there is a limitation to how many opponents, like for example an aggressive Recano deck or Stone Scar deck won't be running many cards that are 4 and above, like maybe 1 or 2. Like all the cards that are relevant are 3 and less, so that card's gonna be negated. It does counter like Eviscerate, but the fact that it replaces itself by drawing a card is quite relevant. That's why I'm willing to give Read the Runes a 3, but I am open to the idea that it's probably going to go down in value later on. Next up, we have Reread. So Reread is interesting, but I think it's more of a constructed card that is limited. Draw a spell from your void, it gets void bound. Oh, sorry, it's a slow spell at uncommon for 2 and a blue. I mean, it could double up as a removal spell, like a second copy of your removal spell, but you have to draw your removal spell, use it, and then draw this. You know, I think it's a little bit more for the Spells Matters deck. I wouldn't fault you for playing this, but you need to have a spell that you want to bring back to play this, which I would pretty much think it's just going to be Eviscerate or Retribution. So yeah, I'm going to give Reread a 2. Don't think you're too excited about taking this. It's fine. It's a filler. Next up, we have Camp Surveyor. And this card actually, I think, is another deceptively good card. It is a 1/4 Yeti at common for 3 and a blue. It has Summon Scout, and then you can shift it for 1. And I think, once again, like I've discussed with other units, the ability to scout every time, whenever it comes into play, makes it good at any point in the curve. A 1/4 body does do quite a bit of effective blocking. It trades for some things if they twist too much. And the fact that shift 1 means you could play it on turn 1 is awesome, because then it doesn't interrupt your curve and you get to scout right away, almost like having a crest. So I do think this card is better than it seems. So I gave Camp Surveyor a 3. I'm not super excited about taking it, but it will fill your curve. So this card here is actually a good one, but it's and this is Frost Elemental. Frost Elemental is a 3/3 elemental at uncommon for 3 justice or 3 primal. It has flying, so 3/3 flyer for 3 is awesome, with a little bit of influence requirement, right? You know, some serious influence requirement. Onslaught, each shifted enemy unit takes 1 additional turn to emerge. So my experience is this card may get 1 emerge or 1 shifted unit, maybe. Obviously you're living the dream if you get 2, but most of the time you're just gonna play it on curve, and it's going to do some serious work for you. I like this card quite a bit. 3/3 flyer is really aggressively statted, so I'm going to give Frost Elemental a 3.5. Of note though, that double primal definitely means that you're not splashing this thing if you want it on curve. Alright, our next card is Lightning Sprite. This is a 1/4 elemental sprite at uncommon for 3 and a primal. It has flying, which once again we've already discussed. 1/4 flyer for 3 is awesome. Does a lot of blocking, but it has twist 1, which we really like. So this is already on the upside. You can twist Lightning Sprite, giving it a +1/-1 to draw a card and discard a card. So giving you card selection while making Lightning Sprite more aggressive. I like this card a lot. It is easily splashable. It can be on defense for as long as you need it. It can help you find the cards you're looking for early or late game, and you could just leave it as is if you don't need to find anything, and then it just gets in there as a beater in the air. I think this card is extremely versatile, and you'd be surprised, and I know because every time my opponent plays it I start to sweat a little bit. So Lightning Sprite, you get a 4 from me. Moving on, we have Peak Top Trekker. This is a 2/2 explorer at uncommon for 3 blue. So same cost as the Frost Elemental. Let's see what's up. It has Overwhelm, and when you scout, Peak Top Trekker gets a +2/+2. Okay, I think this guy can do some work. We've seen a ton of cards with Scout on them in the Stone Scar, or I'm sorry, Skycrag factions. So I think this card can do a little bit with a little bit of work. It could be a 4/4 with Overrun the majority of the time, or at least more often than not. So over 50%. The influence requirement means sometimes it comes down turn 3, sometimes it doesn't. When you draw it late and you've kind of burned through all your scouts, it's not very impressive. It's overstated or overcosted. So I'm gonna give Peak Top Trekker a 3. Next, we have Yeti Instigator, and nothing much to say here. This is just a 3/3 Yeti at common for 3 and a blue. Excuse me. I think it's solid stat line. Still good. It was good in the last format. Still good now. I think it's great. You're happy to fill it your deck with it. So yeah, giving Yeti Instigator a 3. Not much to say here. Moving right along, we have another card that has some great artwork on it. I like this quite a bit. We have Aggressive Urson. It is a 4/3 bear at uncommon for 4 blue. And as Onslaught, your other units get a +2 health, period. Yeah, this card is good. I like it. I like it quite a bit. I am still going to give it a 3 though, because, I mean, you could always just play this on empty board and it does nothing. So it really kind of stinks sometimes when, because it says other units, so it will never buff itself. It'll never be a 4/5. Obviously, you can chain these guys together, but a 4/3 for 4 is solid stats. And like I said, if you go a curve 2/3, attack with those two and play this, now those guys are significantly bigger. Heaven forbid they should be twist units. I think it will do some work. So actually, you know what? I'll bump it up to a 3.5. I think it'll do some work. That being said, like I said, you draw a late game. I mean, it could make your guys bigger. All right, next up we have Death from Above. This is a slow spell at common for 4 and a primal. Give a unit flying and berserk this turn. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a finisher card, right? You have a 6/6 in play or a behemoth. You twisted them. They got huge attack. You give it flying, you berserk it, and you get in for a ton of damage. So this is a finisher. That being said, it has never made the cut of my deck, and I have yet to see an opponent finish me with it. So I am going to give it a 2 because, like, you want to run 1 in your deck and you really want to have the units to make it happen, and that's about it. So yeah, moving right along, this card on the other hand does some work. I feel like it is Elder Meditant. This is a uncommon or a common shaman at 1/2 common, or a 1/2 shaman at common. It has Aegis. And when you twist, I'm sorry, it's 4 cost, 1 primal. And you could twist it for 3, which is right at that middle point. And you can draw a card. Straight up, just draw a card. I think this card can do some work because of the fact that it has Aegis. It could stick around. It would be a target for your opponent to lightning rod for sure because of the fact that it draws you cards. If you're able to add any kind of toughness to this guy or health, so you can start drawing additional cards, then you're definitely getting your money back on it. You could just plain old kill it, just twist it twice, draw 2 cards and kill it. That is a thing as well. So I think it will do some work. I like Elder Meditant. I like having maybe 1. I don't think you'd want 2, but 1's fine in your deck. So I'm giving Elder Meditant a 3. Next up, we have Murderous Flock. So here is what's telling me that the Huru is the kind of, or I'm sorry, never mind. This is Scout. I apologize. Never mind. So it is a 3/3 bird at common for 4 and a primal. And when you scout, Murderous Flock gets flying this turn. So I've seen, it's fine. You're a little understated for the cost. 4 power for a 3/3 is a little under, but the fact that you can give it flying sometimes, it lets it get in there, and it's an okay blocker. So I'm giving Murderous Flock a 3. I think it's okay. The fact that it will occasionally get flying and get in there, if you guys remember the brawler from the last format, it definitely helped its stats a little bit, that it sometimes was able to sneak in extra damage. Granted, it did have Warcry, so that was additional, but it is what it is. Our next card here, I think, is up for grabs for the best artwork of the set for sure for me. And this is Ferocity of Bear. This is an uncommon slow spell for 5 and a primal. And it gives 2 of your units killer. I'm not sure. Like, I'm kind of on the fence about this card. It could potentially kill 2 units for 1 card, which is awesome card advantage. But you have to have 2 units that are big enough to add killer to want to trade. Your opponent needs to be tapped out so they don't have any power open to combat trick and stuff like that. So I'm not really quite sure where it lands. And 5 is a lot. But like I said, Ferocity is 5 to kill, or Eviscerate is Eviscerate is 5 to kill 1 unit, and Ferocity of Bear has a chance to be 5 to kill 2 units with a little bit of a setup cost, a little bit of a high. So I'm going to give it a 3, which once again might be a little ambitious for it. I think I actually had a chance to play this and I cut it because it was 5. But who knows, you know? I guess we'll leave that one up to interpretation and we'll see our experience. All right, moving right along, guys. We have Hold Under. This is a slow spell at common for 5 blue. It has warp and deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the highest attack among your units. So of note, it does the damage itself. Your unit is not doing damage, so it's not Dragon Breath. That could be relevant when it comes to stuff like Deadly and whatnot. It's a slow spell. It's 5, and then they could just negate it with a combat trick or by removing your unit. Yeah, I'm not too high on Hold Under. I think it's okay if you play 1 in your deck. Wouldn't want to really count it as premium removal because you also need to have a big enough unit in the play. So I'm giving Hold Under a 2. Next up, we have Keen Saddleback. This is a 4/4 Flying Serpent at uncommon for 5 primal. So that's great. We like those stats in Justice, so we definitely like those stats in primal. And then you could shift it for 3. Give one of your other units flying until Keen Saddleback emerges. Yeah, this card is great. 4/4 flyer for 5, which is awesome. You're really happy about that. And then if you get it early or even late, you can shift it to give one of your huge units flying, so they have to answer that unit, and then this guy comes out, emerges, and is another threat. I like Keen Saddleback quite a bit. I'm giving it a 4. I think you're happy to play it anytime you can. Next up, I have not even seen this card. That's crazy. Next up, we have Cloud Snake Matriarch. This is a 5/4 Serpent at uncommon as well for 6 primal. It has flying, it has warp, and when you warp a card, including Cloud Snake Matriarch, draw a card. Yeah, I think this card is fine. I like this card actually. I'll slap it. 6 is a little high, but the fact that it draws, you have the potential of drawing a card off of it, I think that gives it some value. Yeah, so I'll give Cloud Snake Matriarch a 4. I think the fact that a 5/4 flyer for 6 is very reasonable stats. You're happy about that. You can warp it in, so you're essentially drawing a card that way. And then if you warped it, you're drawing 2 cards, technically, because you know you're drawing it off the top of the deck, then drawing a card. Yeah, I like Cloud Snake Matriarch. I think it's very powerful. I would be happy to play it as a finisher in my deck. All right, next up we have Diving Terrax, and this is a 2/4 dinosaur at common for 6 and a primal. So yeah, compared to the last uncommon we just saw, the 2 uncommons, it is extremely understated. It does have flying, and then onslaught, deal 2 damage to any enemy, unit, or player. This card's fine. I'm not super high on it, but it's a fine filler. It has evasion. It could potentially finish killing something when it comes into play, or kill something, or just go face. I like it. It is a 3 for me. And see, and we have one more. This card has been surprising me. It is quite a beefy unit. This is Snowmass Jotun. There you go, Jotun. I gotta get used to saying Jotun. This is a 5/7 giant at common for 7 and a primal. It has warp, and you can shift it for 5. You're pretty much almost always shifting this guy for 5, period, even if you draw it with 7 power, because you want to get that free hit of 5 in, unless you really need the 7 health on defense. This card is solid. I like it. 7 is expensive, but like I said, you could play it on 5 if need be. I think it fills out your curve quite well. It doesn't do too bad in multiples either. So yeah, I like Snowmass Jotun. I'm going to give it a 3 because it is a solid curve. But that's it, guys. That'll do it for blue. Primal seems kind of weak to me, honestly. I felt like I gave out more 2s here than I did in any of the other ones, though it did have a couple of 4s as well. So I guess we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I found it a little underwhelming in the spells and lower end of the curve category, and then just a little more impressive in the top end. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the home stretch. We're in our final faction, Shadow. So let's dive right into it. we have first up Blood Nurse. This is a Blood Nurse is a 1/1 shaman at common for 1 and a shadow, and pay 2 to twist Blood Nurse to play a 1/1 vampire bat with flying and lifesteal. Yeah, I think this card is good. Obviously baseline you pay 3 to get a 1/1 flyer, but if you have any way of pumping this guy is armor or health, then you could just start machine gunning 1/1 flyers out, and you know, you get 2, 3, 4 of those life stealing evasive units. It goes a very long way. So I like Blood Nurse. Its baseline is kind of low, but it has a huge upside. So yeah, I gave it a 3. Next up we have Boot Knife, and this card is a +1/+1 relic weapon at common for 1 and a shadow. As onslaught, you have quick draw this turn. Yeah, I don't like this card. I think it's pretty horrible. There is another card that you can combo with it, but once again, I think a card that any card that needs another card to just be okay or serviceable is bad. So I don't like it. Boot Knife gets a 1 from me. Next up we have Muck Crawler. This is a 1/1 ooze at common for 1 and a shadow, and it gets a +2/+2 while you have a shifted unit. I am going to give this card a 2. I know there are others in the community are a little higher on it, but I feel like the fact that, I mean, yes, you have chances of getting a 3/3 for 1, but it is conditional. Sometimes you don't want to shift your units. Sometimes you won't have shift units, and then you know what happens later on. You lose the shift, or the unit emerges, and then it goes back to being a 1/1. I don't think that's that relevant unless you're an extremely aggressive deck, and even then, if you're that aggressive, I don't really see why you're shifting so many units. So yeah, I give Muck Crawler a 2. I know it has some synergies, so that's why I'm giving it a 1, but I'm not very high on it. Next up is Remembrance. This is a slow spell at uncommon for 1 and a shadow. Play a unit from your void with cost 3 or less and shift it. I'm gonna give this card a 2. If you have some kind of super bomb utility, like really a utility unit that's relevant or something like that, or a evasive flyer that just kind of got there, like maybe, you know, something you twisted a couple times or something you modified the stats, then I feel like it could be worth it. Dark Return, it is not, because it costs more and it's limited, but it is what it is. You work with what you got, and Remembrance, you are a 2 for me. Next card on our list is Spiteful Strike. This is a fast spell at uncommon. Artwork is pretty neat. I like it. +1 or 1 shadow is the casting cost, and give a unit a +2/+1 lifesteal and quick draw this turn. Yeah, I like this card. I like this card quite a bit. I think it is a solid combat trick. The fact that on offense or defense, the lifesteal is relevant, and then on defense, the +1 will be relevant. On offense, the quick draw is relevant, and it is 1, so it's easy to leave up. It combos really well with deadly units. I like it. I think there's a reason why it's uncommon and why the developers put it that way. So yeah, I like Spiteful Strike. I gave it a 3. Next card we have is Vicious Rumors. This is a slow spell at common for 1 and a shadow. It has warp, and the player of your choice, which is weird. Oh wait, I guess you could discard yourself. Okay, never mind. Discards the top 2 cards of their deck. Yeah, you don't want to play this in limited. Like, you can't. Yeah, there's just no self-mill deck right now in the format that I'm aware of, and randomly milling your opponent just isn't a thing. So yeah, Vicious Rumors, you get a 1. Moving on. Next up we have Angry Prophet. Let me fix my screen real quick, of course. There we go. Angry Prophet is a 2 or a 1/2 cultist at common for a 2 and a shadow, and +1 attack for each of your other units. So it's kind of a go wide payoff. You know, you figure you play this on turn 2, it's a 1/2, and then you play a 3 and a 4, it becomes a 3/2. This seems okay. It's not super exciting. I give it a 3 because at the very least in late game or installed board states, it's able to trade up. if you're on defense, and then they'll just kind of trade evenly if you're on offense, because you attack, they block with their 2/2 or something like that. And your profit, you get a 3 for me. All right, next card on the list is Auric Reclaimer. This is a 2/3 Minotaur at uncommon for 2 and a shadow. All right, so yeah, that's great. 2/3 for 2 is great stats. We're digging that. Shift 6. Play a relic weapon with attack and health or armor equal to the highest attack and highest armor among relic weapons in your void. Yeah, I mean, it gives you a free weapon, I guess, with it. So there's some plus, but you have to have a relic weapon. You have to have it in the yard already. And then what you know, you have a spear. You have, yeah, I think it's okay. I'm going to keep it at a 3 because the shift ability is not completely busted, but the body in of itself is a great curve filler. So we're Auric Reclaimer, you get a 3. Next up, we have Cabal Repeater. This is a 3/2 gunslinger at uncommon for 2 and a shadow. So there's great stats. Again, we're good with that. It's very aggressive. And then pay 3 to twist Cabal Repeater to give your other units +1 and deadly this turn. I like this card. I think this card is good. It really benefits the go wide strategy. It helps you get in there and trade up with by giving all your units deadly. You're able to do it twice before it dies, or at the very least do it once. Once again, if you pump it, you can do it multiple times in one turn. I think this card is a little stronger than it seems, but I don't think it is completely busted. Obviously, it's not good on defense because it only gives it until the end of turn. So I gave Cabal Repeater a 3.5. I think it is above your regular curve fillers. So here's that card we were talking about. We have Illicit Armament. This is a slow spell at uncommon that gives your relic, for 2 and a shadow, and it gives your relic weapon a +4/+2. Obviously you want to have, I want to say, somewhere around 3 to 4 relic weapons for this to be relevant. And then even then, like, you want to draw them, you have to draw the relic weapon. It has to stay around for a turn and then play that, or make sure you play it on both turns. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it do some work, and that it will combo with the Auric Reclaimer. So if you put this on play a relic weapon, put the armament on it, use it to kill 2 units, it goes to the void, then you shift Reclaimer, you'll get it back with all the full complement of stats. But yeah, I really don't play this card, so I gave it a 2. Moving right along though, we have another interesting card, which is Stained Honor. This guy is a 1/3 Nightmare at uncommon for 2 and a shadow, and it says your twist abilities cost 1 less to use. Yeah, I like this guy. The thing is, a 1/3 for 2 is just completely serviceable. So you're just getting upside with it, with the instant incremental value of the twisting. You know, it makes your 4s cost 3, which puts in reasonable range, and your 3s cost 2 and 2s cost 1, which is awesome. So I do like it. Yeah, that being said, it is just a 3 though. All right, going down the list yet again, we have Unchecked Aggression. This is a fast spell at common for 2 and a purple. It has warp, and your units get a +1 this turn. I think I like having exactly 1 in the deck as a pseudo finisher. I'm not super thrilled about playing it, but I wouldn't hate you for playing it either. I gave it a 2. Maybe a 2.5, but I'm gonna put 2 on the review for you guys that are gonna check in the show notes and see the written version of it. Just because, like, I mean, it is cheap and you can warp it, but +1 attack, it sneaks in some extra damage, lets you trade a little bit more aggressively than your opponent anticipated, but I don't really think it's gonna win you the game as often as like Rally would. Because or when you +1 with the ring and then Overwhelm, like either Overwhelm and additional power or way more power are what really win you the game. Next up, we have Vizier's Tablet. This is an uncommon relic for 2 and a shadow. Pay 3 to discard the top card of the enemy deck. If it was a unit, you gain 1. I mean, that's another one of the mill plans, but it's extremely slow. It does say you can do it more than once per turn, so that's a thing, but you're only getting 1 life. I mean, it pretty much only works on a stalled board state. It's extremely slow. Like, you have to pay 9 to mill your opponent for 3 in 1 turn. Yeah, I'm off of it. Vizier's Tablet, you get a 1. Moving right along, we have Crooked Alley Guide. I like this guy. This is a 3/2 rogue at common for 3 and a shadow. And then Summon Scout, which I won't go in depth. We already know how I like that on all units because it fits everywhere in the curve. And then it has Shift 1. So yeah, we're seeing a theme here. You could play it on 1 if you need to and clean up your draws. I like Crooked Alley Guide. I give it a 3. And then obviously later in the game, you could shift it for 1 just to sneak in an extra 3 damage there later on. Dark Weave Enchantress is our next card, and I'm actually on the fence about this card. Reason being is an 0/4 for 3 is an okay blocker, but you really want some kind of toughness or attack to be able to kill units. It is an uncommon mage. Sorry about that. Yeah, I said 3 in a shadow. Okay. It has deadly, so obviously we're like, all right, what's going on here? Pay 5 to twist Dark Weave Enchantress to play a 1/1 disfigure on an enemy unit. The disfigure is relevant. It stops other units from twisting completely or kills them. It can kill several smaller units. It can make a bigger unit just small enough to block, and it gives itself the +1 needed. It turns into a 1/3 with deadly, which does do some work, but 5 is so expensive of a twist. Like, that's your whole turn. And it doesn't even kill the unit sometimes. So I'm really not sure where to put it. I feel like it's a good card, but the twist might be just a smidge too expensive. So I'm giving Darkweave Enchantress a 5 or a 3. Sorry, 3. All right, guys, let's continue down on the list. We have Death Ripple. Death Ripple is a slow spell at uncommon for 3 and a shadow, and kill an enemy unit with cost 4 or less. Your shifted units get +2 attack, period. I have not played with this card, but I think it's good. I'm going to give it, yeah, I'm going to give it a 4. And I'll tell you why. We liked Extinguish, and Extinguish did something very similar. The one thing this works differently is notice that it only cares about cost. So it doesn't matter if they pump the unit to oblivion, if they twist the heck out of it. I think it's still going to be a solid removal spell. Your shift units get the +2 attack is going to be just a bonus. You're not really trying to. It is good synergy, but it's not going to happen every time. And I think you're perfectly all right at the ground level, paying 3 to just get a unit off the board, period. So Death Ripple, you are getting a 4, which is interesting. I've yet to see this card, so that was kind of neat to kind of get surprised like that. Moving right along yet again, we are going to Gorgon Cutthroat. This is a common 2/2 Gorgon Rogue for 3 and a shadow. It has Ambush, and when Gorgon Cutthroat blocks, it deals 2 damage to you. Wait, what? Yeah, I don't know. You're paying an additional 1 just for this guy to have Ambush, so he can block something. But then when you block, like, you're taking 2 damage, and it's only gonna kill. Like, I don't understand this card at all. So yeah, whatever. I'm gonna give it a 1. I'm off this card. I don't like it. It's probably a 2, but yeah, I just don't understand this card at all. So moving on, let's get to something better. We have Lethrai Dire Beast. This is a 3/3 Dire Beast at uncommon for 3 and a shadow. It has lifesteal, and here's the shadows version of this cycle. Shift 4, give one of your other units lifesteal until Lethrai Dire Beast emerges. Yeah, I like this card. I think it's great. It emerges, it gets in for 3, gives you 3 life, and then while it's sitting there being protected, you can pump one of your huge units into lifesteal or one of your evasive units like a flyer into lifesteal. Yeah, I like Lethrai Dire Beast quite a bit, so it's getting a 4 from me. All right, here's one of our other relic weapons. We have Bandit's Flail. This is a +3/+2 relic weapon at common for 4 and a shadow, and that's it. +3/+2. Does some work. I think it's fine. It's serviceable. Obviously, if you can combo with illicit armament, it does some work, but I mean, that's 6 power in the same turn. Yeah, whatever. Yep, it's getting a 3. Nothing exciting there. Let's move on, because this is a spicy card that's seeing a lot of publicity. This is Razor Quill. It is a 2/4 Dire Beast at common for 4 and a shadow. So 4 power for 2/4 seems good. Twist 1 Just 1. Deal 1 damage to enemy player and gain 1. Yeah, this card is awesome. It is a finisher. It brings you back when you're behind. It's a great blocker. It's good on curve. It just does all the things. And then you can get in there as a 5/1 if you need to. If you keep bumping its health, you can essentially just kill an opponent with it by reaching out and pinging them. And the life steal, it goes both ways. Like, yeah, this card is just great. I like it. I think it's a 3.5. I don't think it's a 4. So yeah. Yeah, we're going to give it 3.5. I think it's a very high pick. This next card, though, I am going to put it at a 4 because it kind of does pull you in that color. And this is Umbran Voidbringer. This is a 2/2 Radiant at Uncommon for 4 Shadow. It has Flying, it has Berserk, and then Onslaught, draw a unit from your Void. That's right. So if you're attacking, even sacrificing a small unit, you can get back one of your best units from your Void for free with this guy because you're getting a unit off it. Then it has Flying, which means evasion, and it has Berserk. So if you figure out a way to pump this guy just one time and get in there, you can get in there for quite a bit of damage and easily finish the game. So I like this card. It draws you a card of your choice essentially by drawing your best unit from your Void. If you have it in your hand, you're able to trade a little more aggressively. Your opponent can like double or triple block to take your big guy out, and then you get it back with this. Yeah, I like it. I mean, you can literally get it back. The unit that attacked to trigger Onslaught can die, and then you get it right back with Voidbringer. So yeah, I like it. It's a high pick for me. We're taking Umbran Voidbringer at a 4. Next on the list, we have Withering Touch. This is a fast spell at Uncommon for 4 and a Shadow, and swap the health of an enemy unit with the health of one of your units. Yeah, this card's good. It does require a little bit of setup, so that's why I'm giving it a 3 for removal, because you want to have a low health unit on your end and a high health unit on your opponent's end. Luckily, Twist makes that happen. But yeah, I like this card. Obviously, in a perfect world, you'd like to do it in combat, so you can also double it into a removal spell, but sometimes just getting more Twist activations is relevant. So I'm giving Withering Touch a 3. All right, here comes one of the premium removal spells of the format in Eviscerate. That's right. This is a slow spell at common. So you're going to see a lot of these at 5 Shadow. And it just says kill an enemy unit. Done. That's it. Period. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a unit, it's dead. And it has Onslaught. So a bonus, the enemy player discards the top 5 cards of their deck. So I have seen this come into play and become relevant if there is a board stall and the game goes long. Milling 5 cards incidentally does kind of do some work, and you can essentially switch to that game plan where you're waiting to mill your opponent out or deck them. So that is something to consider. But yeah, Eviscerate is just a great card. You're happy running it. I probably wouldn't run, I don't know, somewhere between 2 and 3 is probably where I would be at. I don't think you want the 4th one. Just it being 5 is extremely expensive. So, and it is a slow spell, so you can't potentially get a 2 for 1 out of it. So yeah, I think you want to be at like maybe 2 for your deck. And then some decks may not want to run any if it's too expensive. But no, I feel like every deck wants to run 1. Like seriously. Okay, so moving on, we're almost there, guys. Home stretch. We only got a couple left, so thank you so much for bearing with me on this journey. I really appreciate it, and I hope you are enjoying the podcast and get something out of this. Next, we have Fallen Militiaman. This is a 1/1 rogue at Uncommon for 5 and a Shadow. All right, that is insane. Something's got to be going on. Let's go to the tech box. When another unit dies, Fallen Militiaman gets a +1/+1 and shift 3. So essentially you really want to shift this thing on turn 3, so you have the maximum chances of gaining some value. Now granted, it is when units die, so actually, you know what, maybe you don't really care too much about shifting it on 3. You definitely want it to stay on the board long enough to like make some aggressive trades. So it can come down on 5, and then your like 2, 3, and 4 drops can trade or die and essentially pump him. But like, what are we looking for? Like, are we happy with a 4/4 for 5? I mean, I guess if it was like incidental, but not really. I think you really want 4 units to die for this guy to be relevant. Yeah, I'm not really sure what deck wants that guy yet. I don't see a really big go wide strategy. Like there's some things in like Praxis can go wide a little bit with like assembly line or manufacture and the search explorers or whatever, but I mean I don't really see like, you know, savage or scavenge or anything in this format. So I don't know what this deck card wants to do. So for right now, I'm gonna give Fallen Militiamen a 2. I mean, I could see this card if the game goes late being a thing, but at the end, I think I would just want another 5-drop that's already big on its own. All right, guys, moving on, we have Stone Scar Outfitter. Stone Scar Outfitter. This is a 2/3 rogue at common for 5 again and a shadow. Your other units get a +1 attack and shift 4. I think this card is serviceable, but just barely. The +1 attack to your team is relevant. Like that does do some work, and especially when you have more units or you have flyers. That's really where I saw this card come into play, is when I had a couple of flyers in play, especially if you had multiple bats. But man, only getting a 2/3 body for 4 or 5 just doesn't seem exciting. So I don't think you're gonna take this highly, but you are okay running one in your deck. So Stone Scar Outfitter, you get a 3 from me, but barely. Next card we have is Wretched Talon. This is a +3/+3 relic weapon at uncommon for 5 shadow. It has Onslaught, play a 1/1 spider with deadly. So I like this card. I think this card does some work. I'm still gonna give it a 3 because I don't think it's backbreaking at 3/3, but the fact that it does create a deadly unit to defend itself means that it might stick around long enough to take out 2 units, maybe 3 if you count the deadly spider as well. I think this card is fine, but it being 5, it's serviceable. It's serviceable. I like it, but it's not a 4 or anything like that. All right, one of our last cards here in top end is going to be Hunting Anora. This is a 4/4 dire beast at uncommon. It is 6 shadow and has flying. The additional text says Hunting Anora has warp if you or any of your units attacked this turn. So it has like warp if you triggered onslaught. I don't know, it's kind of weird how they worded that, but I guess the reason why they did it is because you don't see it on the top of your deck unless you attack. So it's not like, yeah, because it only gains warp, it could sit on the top of your deck, and then if you chose to randomly attack that turn, then it would trigger and gain warp, and then you would see it on the top. So that's something to consider as well with it in your deck. 4/4 for 6 is flying is good. It's baseline, so I think it's fine. I'll put it as a 3. I drafted this card. No, I didn't. I have not drafted this card yet because I am not sure where to put it. So yeah, let's go with Winnow. It is a slow spell at common for 6 shadow. All right, so it better have some pretty good effects. It has warp, okay, and enemy units get -1/-1. Of note, it is a spell, but the -1/-1 is permanent. That being said, yeah, I mean, how many units do you have to hit with this? Because you have to assume you're not going to kill very many, right? Maybe 1 twisted unit or 1 spider or something small like that. So, you know, best case scenario, you take out 2 units and then shrink like 2. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Winnow is going to be a thing from what I've seen in this format just yet. I could be wrong. Obviously, the developers put it in there for a reason. So, Winnow, you get a 2 from me. And the last card bringing up the rear is a fatty in the form of Direwood Lurker. This is a 4/5 dire beast at common for 7 and a shadow. It has lifesteal and it has shift 6. Yeah, this card is serviceable. I mean, a 4/5 lifesteal, the 4/5 for 7 really makes it underwhelming, but the fact that it has lifesteal, it could block pretty aggressively, attack pretty aggressively, and gain you a lot of life. And obviously, shifting it means that you're getting at least 1 8-point swing out of it for free. I think this card is good. It's a decent finisher. You're not super windmill slamming it stoked that you got it, but it is a good card and 100% serviceable in my book. So yeah, we're going to give Direwood Lurker a 3. Overall, Shadow seems pretty medium. We have 2 really good removal spells in there, and then some decent units around the curve. Nothing that really stood out to me as busted other than the 2 twist units. Oh yeah, and the Voidbringer obviously. But yeah, I think the removal definitely makes it a color that appeals to a lot of people. The coin is a little lackluster, probably the weakest out of all of them is a general consensus. But overall, solid. So yeah, guys, that is going to do it. We've arrived. We made it. Oh no, I take that back. I completely forgot. Almost forgot the one non-color card, which I should have done it at the beginning of the set review. That's okay. Is Seek Answers. This is a slow spell at uncommon for just 2, so it goes in every deck, and you can either choose power or non-power when you play it, then draw a random card of that type from your deck. So of note, it is not fixing because you can't pick which power you get. It just gets a random one, but it does give you power. And later in the game, you can use it, or if you are flooding, to get a spell. So this card is good. I don't think it's busted yet again, but it goes in every deck. It fits your curve everywhere. So I like it. I give Seek Answers a 3. All right, guys, that's going to do it now. That is our podcast. That is our commons and uncommon set review for Dark Frontier set 6 of Eternal Card Game. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and bearing with me on this one. I know it was a long haul. We'll see how long it goes when I edit it. It will be a couple hours for sure, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you agreed with some of my ratings, disagreed, if this helped you in any way draft. If it was too long or if it was too short, if you liked the commons and the uncommons together, you want me to separate them again, make sure you guys are sharing the podcast and leave me likes and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. It goes a long way towards helping me to continue to do this content for you guys. I am doing it on my own completely. And to plug my social media, you guys can catch me on Twitter and YouTube, where you can catch this podcast as well as other constructed and limited videos at EJthePodcast, both on Twitter and YouTube. You can catch my real life stuff on Instagram at CaesarLebear7. And if you have any comments that you want to keep a little more private, you can email me at EJthePodcast@gmail.com. And last, you can catch me streaming live every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday mornings at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. That's JEDI_EJ for Eternal Journey. Once again, thank you guys so much. You are fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of this. By all means, like I said in the comments below, I love your feedback. Send it my way. And until next time, happy gaming.